Well, they got something done last night in Congress. I can't believe it.
Talk about a bombshell.
Yeah, how about that? Good morning, 6:05. It is great to be here on 95.7 FM, KCMO Talk Radio. We are always streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. So I am not going to make your eyes glaze over at 6:05 and break down by the numbers this House GOP budget plan. I'm also not interested in telling you how it's the greatest plan that a political party has ever passed in modern American history. I'm not going to do it because I don't know that to be true. I do know this. The story about this budget plan that passed last night in the House of Representatives, 217 to 215, is more about unity in the Republican Party than it is about what comes out of this bill. Because this is a budget proposal out of the House. It now goes to the Senate. It's expected to get sliced and diced in the Senate. They want some more tax cuts. They want to make the Trump tax cuts permanent. And then it will go back to the House, where it would have to pass again before it, of course, goes to Donald Trump's desk. So this is far from being over. There's no point in breaking it down. This will be like breaking down a preseason NFL game. It's kind of pointless, but it gives you some idea and some framework as to what your team is going to look like, right? That's what I would say about this budget plan. But it's more about the Republican Party, which oftentimes was always a more fractured party than the Democrats, coming together, only losing one vote, and that's all they could afford to lose. And it was Thomas Massie out of Kentucky and passing this budget proposal 217 to 215. And if you are a Republican voter and you wanted to see Donald Trump and this party actually have a chance to govern, not have infighting, well, you're getting exactly what you wanted. You have the House, you have the Senate, you have the White House. You have more or less been given a mandate here, so now you actually have to govern. If you're going to infight, that would have looked worse than passing this thing on a very partisan basis. Every Democrat voted against it, and every Republican outside of Thomas Massie in Kentucky voted for it. So what you're going to see here is this House plan, and you heard some of the headlines from Fox News, calling for $1.5 to $2 trillion in spending reductions over a decade. Now, that sounds like a big number. It's actually not. $2 trillion over a decade is $200 billion a year. And that may not be the perfect breakdown, but on average, that's exactly what it is, right? And considering we're running a $2 trillion annual deficit, I don't sit here overly impressed by $200 billion a year in cuts. Now, this DOGE stuff is totally different, right? Because you're just kind of getting rid of the fat. But let's be honest, as much as I think DOGE is great and doing a lot of really good things that needs to be done, like making the government more efficient, how about this? Getting them off of floppy disks. When's the last time you saw a floppy disk, Mark? Can you think of the last time you just saw one of those things? I think for me, it was probably middle school, maybe high school.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe college for me.
Okay.
Early college.
Early college, yeah. You got me by a couple of years. But
2003.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, which for me would be like sophomore year of high school, give or take. I don't want to make John feel old. He's just run out of the building because he's so upset by that line. But you get the point. It's been a long time. You have government agencies still using floppy disks. So what DOGE is doing is separate. It's needed. It's good. But you still have government waste and government spending, and they've got to figure out the big things here. And that is what to do about Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And it's been that third rail in politics for so long, no one's been willing to touch it. And as much as trimming out all the fat from government is needed, it's also not going to fix the problem. If they are genuinely serious about trying to get a balanced budget, if they're actually looking to figure out a way to get spending under control and really cut $1 to $2 trillion, you're going to have to remake these programs, re-envision these programs. There's no choice. And we'll find out before long whether or not they actually have the gumption to do that. So this GOP budget passes the House last night. Sharice Davids, Kansas Congresswoman, she put up a post on X, And it read, Kansans should not pay more or travel farther for worse health care just to give billionaires a tax break. The president and the House GOP Medicaid cuts would hurt families, close hospitals, and take care away from seniors and people with disabilities. I'm working to protect and expand Medicaid. That is from Kansas Congresswoman here in Johnson County, Sharice Davids. Now, it's not entirely true how they're doing this, right? They're going to say it's just going to automatically make poor people who are on Medicaid not have benefits anymore. That's always been a classic fear tactic that gets used. Are there ways to cut Medicaid where you find waste, fraud, and abuse? A lot of people believe that there is. The GOP knows that it can't just start throwing poor people off of Medicaid. Do you realize how bad that would look? They're not the brightest bulbs. I'm not going to say that the GOP is. They're not, but they're not that dumb. But that's, of course, a common line that's getting used since last night by many on the Democratic side of the aisle. And then Emmanuel Cleaver, congressman from Kansas City, he had this to say.
You mustard moo.
Yeah, that was Cleaver's official statement from his press office after the House GOP passed its plan last night. Oh, my gosh, that will just never get old. That is the gift that's going to keep on giving. Oh, my gosh, 6:11. It is good to have you here on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. We are always streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. So I'm just sitting here with some trepidation. Mark Alford, our Missouri Congressman, 4th District, he is going to be joining us later this morning at 8 o'clock to talk about this and give us a little more insight, because I see these big numbers, I see these headlines, and just like you, because I'm not some policy wonk sitting in Washington, D.C., poring over thousands of pages of budgets, my eyes start to glaze over. So I want to know, they passed this deal. What does it mean for you? What does it mean for us? What are the cuts that they're actually looking at? And frankly, are these cuts deep enough? And that's why it's believed the one GOP holdout was Thomas Massie. He didn't think there was enough cutting in this bill. And he's just one of those IDAGF guys. Think about the acronym after you drink your coffee. IDAGF. He just doesn't care. He's not there to appeal to Trump. He's not there to appeal to the House GOP. He's just there to vote his conscience. And he's the kind of guy who doesn't care whether or not he keeps this job. And isn't that such an admirable trait from somebody in Washington, D.C.? Like, I'm not mad at the guy. The bill passed, got through the House. He was a no vote. He's proven over the years to be a guy that just doesn't care whether or not he maintains his job in the House of Representatives. And if we had more people like that, we'd have a lot more honesty coming out of that Capitol building. That's for damn sure. 913-408-7957.
I am with you on that. I admire his outlook. I'm questioning whether in 4 years there you can get anything done. So I would be for term limits, but for maybe 6 years. I'd be curious about Mark's take on that. Like, you get there, you got to go around the track once and learn stuff, right?
I agree.
Yeah, and so in order for somebody to be effective, maybe they should be there for 6 years and then get out.
Yeah, at least 6. I might give the House like up to 10 years. That's 5 terms in office. I might give the Senate 3. That's 18 years. But you're right. 2 years
That's
is
a lot
not
of
enough.
retirement I'm paying coming out of my wallet.
I know.
I'm saying?
I'm feeling generous this morning, John. I guess I'm feeling a little generous, maybe too generous.
But back to the original point, kudos to Massie for saying, I don't care if I get reelected. I'm here to do what you need done.
I don't give a you-know-what. 6:14, coming up on KCMO Talk Radio. A decision was made on the future employment of an area law enforcement officer who put up a very stupid, and I would argue, racist meme. And it now, well, we'll tell you what it means for his job status here in the Kansas City area. That's next on KCMO.
Hump Day on the Guy Benson Show. Great lineup for you. The border czar from the Trump administration, Tom Homan, is here talking about his important work coming up at 2 o'clock on KCMO.
You know, I'm all about what's going on and how ICE is handling its business. But I will say that when you do something really dumb and when it makes the rest of us look bad, I don't have any sympathy for you. I don't. And that's how I feel about this Clay County Sheriff's deputy who it turns out was terminated for a dumb meme that he put up on his social media page. This guy is a Clay County Sheriff's deputy, and the meme he put up after El Potro was raided by ICE agents, 2-3 weeks ago, Mexican restaurant up in Kansas City or up in Liberty. He put up a meme, and I didn't see it, but it's been described as a fake image of Donald Trump holding a gun out of a car window with the words, "Time to put the panic back in Hispanic."
He's a sick guy.
That is tasteless. It is classless. It isn't funny. It's dumb. And it's racist. And frankly, it makes all of us who actually support the policies because we care about the well-being of the American people look ridiculous. First off, if you followed the news at all, if you followed 4 years under Joe Biden and the border, it's not just those of Hispanic descent who are crossing the border illegally, right? Like, it's people from all over the world. It's Chinese nationals, it's African nationals, it's, yes, folks from Central and South America, it's Russians, it's everybody who's coming here illegally.
It's as if the Mexicans is the least of our trucking fubbles.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that properly, by the way. I wouldn't trust myself to say what you just said.
All right.
But well done by you.
Yeah, here I am killing it. Right?
Yeah, check out for the day, John. You're good, man. No, you're right. I mean, this isn't like 25 years ago under the Bush administration when it was single Mexican men coming here to earn a few bucks to send back home. It's a completely different border. So the meme itself is just inaccurate. It's corny. It's racist. And for those of us who care about the border because, you know, we care about the stories of people like Laken Riley, the young girl who lost her life going out for a run at the University of Georgia and was killed by a man who was here illegally, who was well known by law enforcement around the country and nobody did anything about him. We care about those people, care about the jobs in oftentimes poorer neighborhoods where those people now have to compete with illegal immigrants for labor, for work. I mean, those are the communities that get impacted the most by this, right? It's not your hoity-toity Northeast Johnson County neighborhoods that feel the impact of illegal immigration. They don't have to compete for housing. They don't have to compete for jobs. They don't see them. They might see them like in their lawn, right? Mowing their lawn, but they don't have to compete with them in any real way, shape, or form. Those in the working poor communities around Kansas City and around the country have to compete with them. So that's also what this is about. It's about the economy at large as well. And it's not that every illegal immigrant is here to hurt somebody. I don't believe that to be true. But you still have to be a country of laws, and you can't allow millions of people to come across the border and have no idea who they are or what their intentions are. And that's where Joe Biden failed miserably the last 4 years. So for those of us who support the Trump administration's policies on especially focusing on people who are here illegally, who are committing crimes here while being here illegally, that is a popular policy amongst the American people. But of course, when stuff like this happens with a Clay County Sheriff's deputy, this gets a lot of attention. You get people who are like dying to cover stories like this in local news because it makes Trump supporters look racist or something. So what this guy did is, first off, he embarrassed the Clay County Sheriff's Department, which is a great department led by Will Aiken, who does an outstanding job up there in the Northland. It makes the department look bad. And then it gives, it just puts it on a tee for those in local media who want to portray the narrative that those of us who actually like the policies of this administration when it comes to the border are somehow wanting to also send out these ridiculous memes and, there's some racial tinge to what's going on here, when that's not the case. Because the border's been wide open to people of all backgrounds, from every walk of life, from all over the world. That's what's going on right now. 913-4087-957. That's the text line and the studio line on KCMO Talk Radio. We've got you this morning as well. Barbara is in Kansas City. Hey, Barbara, good morning. What's happening?
Good morning, Mundo.
How are you, Barb?
I'm doing great. I just, it's not so much as I totally agree with what you're saying about people coming in legally. I agree with that. Mine is on a different topic. Mine is on the topic of all these government workers who are losing their job or that say that they don't want to work in the office. Why don't they just redirect their position and have them investigate Medicaid? There's so many people out there that are taking advantage of Medicaid and are working the system and getting money, so much money, and they could save thousands, if not, billions of dollars by doing that. I mean, what's your viewpoint on that?
Well, I don't know that to be the case, but I certainly know that there's plenty of reports on it, and someone's got to get to the bottom of it, because that's the first thing you do. You look at where the waste and the fraud and the abuse is,
right?
And that's the first thing that has to be done for all of these programs. I don't know how rampant it is, but I know this much. No one's checked on it in a very long time, so why not start there? Now, do I trust, would I trust the people who are getting laid off or who might be getting laid off to do that? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I think it takes high-level people that probably have not been government employees to start digging into this stuff. And that's where I think it should start.
Yeah, I just think that people just, because, it's been known in Kansas City for a long time, and I know the mayor listens to this. Maybe he'll, listen to this and say, hey, maybe we need to investigate, or maybe he won't. I don't know. But I know a lot of people in Kansas City that, I've seen it on Facebook of where they have multiple children because they can get free money from the government, and, it's just wrong, and I think that, they should pay back the money myself, because I had to do that. There was a time where I had to do that for 2 years, and I had to pay all of it back with child support. They took my child support.
My final words of advice, Barb, would be, don't believe everything you see on Facebook.
Well, that's true. I agree with that. But you know what? I know you got to go, but you guys have been a great morning transition for me. I enjoy listening to you guys, and you're wonderful. Keep it up.
Thank you, Barbara. I appreciate that. That's very nice of you. Very nice of you.
She's a real beauty.
We love Barb. But listen, is there abuse by individuals and by those, at the halfway point, at the midway point of all of these major entitlements? No doubt in my mind. Where are they? I don't know. But that's where you got to trust people at a very high level to do the job that needs to be done.
Leave no stone unturned.
Please do not leave any stone unturned. 628, good morning. Great to have you here on a Hump Day Wednesday morning. Speaking of big things happening today, Chiefs, Royals, drama down in Jeff City. I'll tell you what's happening. You'll get it first here on KCMO.
KCMO, Kansas City's place to talk. On 95.7 FM and 710 AM. A Cumulus media station.
Hey, it's Dan Bongino. You're listening to Pete Mundo on KCMO Talk Radio, now on FM at 95.7.
Big meeting today down in Jefferson City. So I'll share with you what I know about this meeting. And a lot of people have been very tight-lipped about what's going on today down in Jeff City. But Missouri Governor Mike Kehoe will be hosting members of the Jackson County Legislature to try to figure out what the heck is going on. with the Royals and the Chiefs. You've heard multiple reports over the last few days, led by our good friend Kevin Keatsman, coming up at 10 o'clock. He's had a lot of great information about the Kansas side and how there is certainly drummed up enthusiasm for what's happening on the Kansas side. Whereas we've shared with you some of the rumblings on the Missouri side and where people are at on the Missouri side, and the answer appears to be nowhere. So I thought this was put well by somebody I trust on the issue. And this individual told me that basically everybody assumes that someone else is doing something, but no one is actually doing anything. No one is leading on the issue. The state is out there saying, the county's got to figure out what it's going to do with the teams, and then maybe the state can come in on the back end and try to help here. Okay. Well, we know the county is doing nothing because the county executive is Frank White, and he has no interest, as far as we can tell, in dealing with the Royals for obvious reasons that we've noted for many years. And then on the other side, you got the Chiefs, who he claims he's happy to talk to, but no one is aware of any conversations that have happened between Jackson County, Frank White's office, and the Kansas City Chiefs in recent weeks. And this comes, of course, almost a year after that tax extension was put on the ballot in Jackson County, and it went down in flames for the Royals to go downtown to the Crossroads and for the Chiefs to basically use that money to upgrade Arrowhead Stadium. And no one really knows, as far as I can tell, what the teams ultimately want to do. The teams have until 2030 to basically, they don't have until 2030 to figure out their plans, but that's when their lease is up at the Truman Sports Complex in 2030. So they still have some time to figure out where they want to be, what they want to do, and what they want to build. All that can still be done and accomplished. That is not something that has to be figured out in the next couple of months. But obviously, the sooner the better. So we'll see what comes out of this meeting today down in Jeff City. Governor Kehoe is going to meet with members of the county legislature. It sounds like Manny Abarca and our buddy Sean Smith are both down there for in-person meetings. Some other people may be on a Zoom call, is what I'm hearing right now. But if Kehoe is going to basically say, hey, you guys got to figure this out, and then the Jackson County legislature is like, yeah, but Frank White doesn't want to do anything, and then Kehoe's like, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, Kehoe, I think, has to lead the way. Because right now you have an untenable situation between the county executive, Frank White, and the legislature itself. Heck, they may be suing him, which is what we shared with you and broke the news on last week. There's a lawsuit that has been drafted where the county legislature is suing the county executive over the fact that they are still not operating on a budget for 2025. Like, we're 2 months into the year, and they are not operating on a budget for this year. It's a joke. So that relationship is totally fractured. Frank White could resign. There's some belief that people may try to get him to resign. There's obviously right now, you can sign a recall petition to try to get that on the ballot to get rid of Frank White as county executive. There's a lot of people doing that, but they still need signatures. And there's going to be a big push for those signatures in April. When people go to the polls in these local elections, there will be people trying to get voters to sign the Frank White recall petition to get that thing on the ballot. And that may be the impediment right now to getting any kind of a deal done. But if Frank is still there, then it's going to be on Kehoe, who's a new face, new governor, wants to make it work for these teams in Missouri. He said as much on the show and elsewhere. There might be some state help as well to come along in the process, but he's going to have to be the guy to bridge that gap. Because if they just go down there and they meet with the governor and the governor's like, yeah, go figure it out with Frank White. You know and I know nothing's going to happen. Nothing is going to get better. And nothing is going to change outside of driving the teams into the arms of the state of Kansas, which I believe to be a huge mistake. Not because I don't want to see the teams in Kansas or really have a horse in the race. I mean, I think the Star Bonds are, generally speaking, comical. I don't trust them. I don't trust a lot of the people that talk like they're the greatest thing ever because you don't see other states copying these Kansas Star Bonds in large part. But we'll leave that conversation aside for now. We'll see how that meeting goes today. When I have more, I'll share it on X, on Facebook. Look it up there at Pete Mundo. And, of course, we'll have the full coverage for you tomorrow morning after that meeting takes place today down in Jefferson City. In the meantime, Dan Bongino, of course, is leaving radio to go work for the FBI. Dan is on KCMO Talk Radio every day from 11 to 2. He will be on for the next, 2.5 weeks or so. And we'll be enjoying the last 2.5 weeks of Dan Bongino. What happens after that remains to be seen. But yesterday, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt had to defend Dan Bongino because, my gosh, I talked to people yesterday who don't agree with Dan Bongino's politics. And they were like, wow, the media treated this guy poorly a couple of nights ago. Far-right conspiracy theorist, wackadoo podcaster, Dan Bongino. Yeah, he's a crazy right-wing freak podcaster. And he's going to work for Trump. It's like, even the people I know who don't care for Bongino's politics were like, wow, that was completely unfair coverage. I mean, the guy had a Secret Service career. He was a, cop in New York City. And yes, he became a very prominent voice amongst Donald Trump supporters through the podcast and, yes, a 3-hour daily radio show. The way these goobers on TV talk, it's like, he's just a podcaster. Well, the 3 hours of radio he did was arguably more influential because of the reach that he had and doing it 3 hours a day compared to about a 1-hour podcast than what he was doing on the podcast. But, once again, that ties back to how national television media does not give this format the credit it deserves. Local talk radio is doing very well in many different cities around the country. But because these people live in D.C. and New York and they don't consume the product, because they're not in their cars traveling to work every day, they're on mass transit, they're doing whatever they do, they don't realize that power is still very much out there in our local communities like right here in Kansas City. So Caroline Leavitt, White House press secretary, had to defend Dan Bongino yesterday during her press briefing, and here's what she said about our colleague.
In ways that many people have not. He understands the depth of the corruption at these institutions, which the American people reelected President Trump to shake up. And I think it's quite despicable to see many networks in this room who have had chyrons on their television screens labeling Mr. Bongino as a far-right podcaster. He is not. He is a former law enforcement agent. He is a former Secret Service agent who put his life on the line to protect this country. And that is why the President of the United States has entrusted him for this important role. He's also an outsider to this Washington swamp. And we often see that when outsiders are appointed to such coveted positions, a lot of people in this city get very, very nervous. And they should be, because Dan Bongino and Kash Patel and Attorney General Bondi are focused on rooting out the corruption at these agencies and ending the weaponization of government once and for all.
There you go. That was White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt talking about and defending Dan Bongino to be Deputy FBI Director. I don't know how good of a job Dan is going to do. I have no idea. I don't know him personally. He's been on the show a couple of times. I think he does a really good radio show. He certainly has built a very strong audience. I don't know if he's going to be a great Deputy Director of the FBI. I know this much. The people who won the election, most notably Donald Trump, is okay with the pick. So he deserves a chance. But man, the media coverage has just been totally unfair. And I'm glad that Caroline Leavitt called that out for what it is. And we'll be listening to Dan 11 o'clock this morning after Kevin Keatsman on KCMO. The 6 at 6, top 6 stories in the 6 o'clock hour, we will get to next on 95.7 FM. In the meantime, we finally have some good weather around here. So rather than thinking about, are my pipes going to burst, you can think about plumbers from the perspective of, do I need a new tub or shower? And if you do, the local option here in Kansas City is the Plumbing Pro. For over 40 years, they've been the new Bath Pro as well. You see all the national personalities on TV talking about their tub and shower replacements. Well, the Plumbing Pro is your local alternative. And right now with Pete's deal, get $2,000 off and 12 months same as cash with approved credit. Save money and time. They're easy to work with. low stress, and yes, a free consultation. The Plumbing Pro is where your sales consultant remains with you throughout the entire process, start to finish. And whatever you need, custom tile solutions, they've got you covered. Need a walk-in tub? Why go anywhere else? Plumbing Pro. Call them right now and ask about Pete's deal. $2,000 off, 12 months, same as cash. 816-763-8200. Or probably the easier option, the website, theplumbingpro.com. That's theplumbingpro.com.
Call Mundo, 913-408-7957. Now on 95.7 FM.
Taking you up until 7 o'clock on KCMO Talk Radio. It is that time of the morning.
It's time for the 6 at 6 on 95.7 KCMO Talk Radio.
6 stories to know in the 6 o'clock hour.
Number 1.
We've got some information on the tragic death of Kansas City sports reporter Aden Manzano, who died in his hotel room down at the Super Bowl in New Orleans earlier this month. We now know that Xanax was in his system, according to a detective involved in the investigation. And, of course, there is somebody who has been arrested for this, Danette Colbert, 48 years old, who is charged with fraud after detectives said videos show her using one of Manzano's credit cards. She's not been charged with his death yet, but we do know that the two obviously spent some amount of time together. She was seen walking out of the hotel that he was staying in. And then, of course, she was busted using one of his credit cards. And now we know that Manzano had Xanax in his system. Now, what was this Xanax laced with? That, of course, remains to be seen. But that's what you are dealing with. And we've talked a lot about just when it comes to the issues in this country over the last couple of years. Is it fentanyl related to the Xanax? I don't know. We don't have those answers yet. But we do know whatever this young man took, and he was, 26 years old. He leaves behind a 2-year-old daughter. His wife had died in a car crash last year, so now their child is an orphan. And all because of what was supposed to be, a celebratory week for this young man's career covering a Super Bowl in Kansas City. So as more comes out on this story, we'll get it to you. But right now we do know, based on the toxicology report, that there was Xanax in his system.
Number 2.
Speaking of the Chiefs, on a much lighter note and arguably better note, but I see some people arguing against this, Travis Kelce looks like he's coming back, if you want to listen to what Brett Veach had to say yesterday. When he told the media, quote, he has one more year on his contract. We left it at he'd be back, and we're excited to have him back. I don't believe that Veach would have been that adamant about it had he not felt really good about Kelce returning. I don't think that Brett Veach, a guy who keeps things pretty close to the vest, would have been that direct in his answer if Travis Kelce was actually not going to come back. So it seems like Kelce's coming back, despite people thinking that he was going to potentially retire after a really bad Super Bowl performance against the Eagles. So he's coming back. He's got one more year on the contract, and let's run it back, fellas.
He also said that Kelce was really sick before the Super Bowl.
I saw that.
I had not heard that, so that was kind of interesting.
I hadn't heard that either. I mean, he did not look good. You look back on some of that game film where he's supposed to be in there as a blocker at tight end. Woo, man. I mean, I could have put on a better block on a 270-pound defensive end than Kelce was putting on people. I would have gotten steamrolled. I mean, I would have been flat as a pancake, but I would have at least
hit somebody.
I would have hit somebody. Kelce's like shoulder blocking people. He was like a wet noodle out there on some of those blocks. Man. But obviously, that game is not going to define his career no matter what he does. But good for Travis if Brett Veach is right, and I believe that he is.
I think he deserves the farewell tour.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
No.
Who, Kelce?
I don't believe in farewell tours, John.
Oh, you don't? I
No.
see. Well, I know, like when Elway came here, Dan Fouts, they get a standing O from the crowd at Arrowhead. You see him twice a year. So, there's respect that's paid by fans.
I just remember when Derek Jeter did his with the New York Yankees.
Oh, I see what you're saying. No, I perhaps mislabeled it that way. I mean, it was, the guys say, hey, this is my last year. And so when they come around, then they get a standing O from their competitors, out of respect.
That's classy. But do you remember?
That's kind of what I mean. So I maybe mischaracterized it. Anyway.
Derek Jeter did that. And every
you're
city he
right.
went to, they gave him some corny gift.
Yeah,
it's
no. This is just for the crowd to say, hey, thanks.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. It's not, I guess it's as confirmed as it will be until Kelce officially says something himself.
Number 3.
All right. Third biggest story we're watching. Overland Park last night. And this actually came first here to us on social media on KCMO. But officers responded to an armed robbery. 7400 block Shawnee Mission Parkway. That's a quick trip. And a suspect was located. Officers engaged in a vehicle pursuit that traveled into Missouri, and the suspect was taken into custody by Lee's Summit Police. So the picture that we had shared with us on social media, and you can see it right now on my X page at Pete Mundo, is basically a quick trip that was totally blocked off. One of our listeners alleges that a masked gunman with AK-47s committed grand theft auto at this quick trip at Shawnee Mission Parkway in Metcalf. And all we've got is that statement I just read to you from the Overland Park Police Department. So we'll try to get more from them this morning here on KCMO. But, I mean, that's an awful look. Absolutely awful look for that part of town. And I can't say it's shocking because it's what we've talked about for the better part of 5 years now. The crime issues that exist in this region are not going to be forever exclusive to parts of Kansas City, Missouri. It will spread to other parts of the community. And you've been seeing more of that in recent years.
Number 4.
And that leads right into story number 4 this morning. And that is the story out of Prairie Village about an attempted armed carjacking. So, I mean, you look at what's going on right now in certain parts of Kansas City, and it is not a good look for the region as a whole. Now, all in all, what do you do about this? Well, there's nothing to do about it right now. I think we've got good law enforcement in most of the Kansas City area. But it's why it's so imperative for Melissa Johnson, the new prosecutor in Jackson County, who we've invited to come on the show this week, to make sure that she gets that office up and running. And just like people say with Trump when it comes to the government at the federal level, I'm not going to sit here after a month and say she's doing a good job or a bad job. She deserves time, 6 to 12 months, to implement her plan and see if it reduces crime in Jackson County in particular. I'm not going to judge her based on 6 weeks on the job, just like I don't think you can judge Donald Trump based on 6 weeks on the job. But man, it is the most important role right now in Kansas City politics, the new Jackson County prosecutor, and we hope to get her on the show soon here on KCMO Talk Radio.
Number 5.
Fifth biggest story here this morning we're keeping an eye on, the Clay County deputy who was fired after posting a meme on Facebook a couple of weeks ago about putting the panic back in Hispanic with a fake picture of Donald Trump holding a gun out of a car window. He was fired. And listen, I have very little sympathy for someone who is that dumb in that position, posting it on social media. And the annoying part for me is that for those of us who support Trump's policies when it comes to deportations and ICE, it gives the media exactly what they want, where they can say, yep, see all these Trump supporters who want to deport people here illegally who are committing crimes. They're secretly just a bunch of racists. They just won't tell you that. No, they're not. But it's dumb memes and posts like this from a Clay County Sheriff's deputy that make us all look bad. So I've got no sympathy. He had to be fired. I don't know how you could bring him back because it just shows such a poor level of judgment for somebody in law enforcement that you can't retain them. I don't like to see people lose their jobs, whether it's sheriff's deputies in Clay County or IRS workers. But whether it's cutting the fat or firing for cause because of really poor decision-making, sometimes you got to do it.
Number 6.
And the sixth biggest story is, of course, where we started the show this morning. House passing its GOP budget plan 217 to 215. It squeaked by a couple of votes. One Republican, Thomas Massey out of Kentucky, voted no. Now the budget proposal goes to the Senate, where it's likely to get changed and then go back to the House. So there's still a ways to go on this budget proposal. There's the 6 at 6 coming up. We got to defend somebody on the Missouri side. We'll tell you who and why next. They tried to come after our man Jason Smith on the Missouri side of the state line. He is a congressman from the southeast part of the state of Missouri. And I'm just here to clear the air on this, that what Jason Smith is saying is absolutely spot on. And it only takes a little bit of common sense to really understand why. It's great to be with you, 7:05 on a Wednesday on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. So the biggest national story of the morning is that the House GOP budget plan passed 217 to 215, which means now this budget proposal will go to the Senate. They're likely to pass their own version, so then it has to go back to the House and pass there before it potentially goes to Donald Trump's desk. There's a call for up to $2 trillion in spending cuts over a decade and about $4 trillion in tax cuts, but it's really just extending the Trump tax cuts from 2017, which, whether you like them or not, gave the vast majority of people tax breaks in this country. Now, the talking point on the other side is the tax breaks were mostly for the wealthy. Well, when the top 1% pay 50% of the taxes, of course, by nature, the top 1% are going to get the bulk of the cuts because they pay the bulk of the taxes. But doubling standard deductions and doing a lot of things that this Trump tax bill did worked out for most Americans, by and large. And still, the revenues to the government are higher than they've ever been. So this notion of, well, you know, if you do this, the rich aren't going to pay their fair share and the government isn't going to get the money to help people that need it. They've got more money than they've ever gotten before. So this had to be done. Now, is it the greatest bill ever? Probably not. I mean, I don't trust either side in large part when it comes to the spending. They both screwed it up for the better part of 30 years. And $2 trillion in tax cuts, it's great, but it's only $200 billion a year on average. And we're running a $2 trillion deficit. So I'm not going to act like it's the greatest bill known to mankind, but it passed. The broader story is that the House GOP stayed together. And for a party, and specifically a House caucus, that has been fractured and driven by drama in recent years, Matt Gaetz and others, who just seem to thrive off of trying to become famous rather than working on behalf of the American people, it's a step in the right direction. So we'll have Mark Alford on 1 hour from now to react to this vote yesterday and what it means. But Jason Smith was on Fox Business yesterday, and he was asked specifically about the report that this budget bill will end up cutting SNAP benefits, which are food stamps. And Jason Smith wisely and very effectively explained that that's not what's going on here, despite the hysteria.
What do you want to say to those people who are upset about these cuts to the SNAP and nutrition assistance? $230 billion in cuts to SNAP and nutrition assistance?
For one, you can't say that it's cuts to SNAPs. This resolution just says the Ag Committee has to cut more than $200 billion. What you have is other people like the Democrats going out there saying you're going to cut Medicaid, you're going to cut benefits. Nowhere, Maria, in the resolution does it say what the cuts are. It just sets the goal and the target rate of how much we're going to cut.
Atta boy, Jason Smith. Well done.
This is absolutely lit. This is lit.
See, that's the kind of stuff you got to hear from people. And then I guess we can explain it further here on KCMO. But think about it like this. You've got to cut $1,000 from your household budget, right? Let's just say you're looking at your household income and you're spending $1,000 a month more than you can make right now. And your spouse says to you, we're all going to starve. We're all going to die. We're not going to make our mortgage payments. And you're like, no. What we need to do is we need to, let's say, downgrade our vehicle. What we need to do is we need to go out to dinner less. We need to get rid of our frivolous spending so that way we cover our basic expenses. What Jason Smith is saying there is that the Ag Committee, which is the money that SNAP resides under, Department of Agriculture, Ag Committee, they're the ones who obviously determine their budgets. They've got to find $200 billion in savings. So when that news gets announced, what happens? People that don't want to see the cuts, they'll say, well, that's obviously going to be to SNAP benefits and food stamps. It's like, well, no. Hold on a second here. Hold on a second. Why would you assume, just like if you had to save $1,000 a month from your household budget, why would you assume that you're now not going to buy food, that you're not going to pay your electric bill, but you're going to keep the car and the car payment that you can't afford? No, I mean, you're smartly going to look through your budget and say, eat out less, downgrade the car, less clothes this month, whatever you're going to do, no vacations for a little bit. Those are the decisions that you're going to make. At least that's what you would do if you were like smart looking at your own household budget. You wouldn't look at it and immediately be like, man, can't make the mortgage payment this month. Can't keep the lights on. Can't stay warm. Can't feed my kids. You wouldn't do that. So it's the same thing here with the federal budget, John.
Well, jumping to conclusions as well. Thanks for hating puppies. Right.
Of course.
Might as well get everything in.
It's always like the worst of the worst is definitely what's going to happen if you, God forbid, talk about cutting any government department. Try to find any savings. Immediately, what happens? No food stamps. We're all going to die. People are going to be, dropping dead on the streets. No, stop with the fear-mongering, please. Stop with that. And Jason Smith explained that very well. In terms of finding cuts, you don't go to the core of one of the biggest issues and biggest things that the department oversees. But that's exactly what, Sharice Davids here in Kansas was alluding to last night with her social media post. I'll share with you what Sharice Davids had to say here. Kansas Congresswoman, 3rd District, Johnson County. She posted on social media, tonight's partisan budget is nothing more than a giveaway to billionaires and big corporations. It's an extension of the current tax plan, is what it is. It's an extension of the tax policies that currently exist at the expense of hardworking Kansans. She says, I voted no. She adds it guts Medicaid, spikes healthcare costs. I don't know. My healthcare costs keep going up. I'm not a healthcare expert, but guess what? I see those premiums. I see what's getting taken out of my paycheck. It keeps going up every single year. I don't know about yours, and I'm not knocking my company. I'm saying the cost of business in the healthcare sector continues to go up. And why is it that it's continued to go up in recent years, despite the fact that we were told that Obamacare was going to amazingly be this bulletproof plan to save us all money on our health insurance? That really hasn't transpired, has it? The cost for that sector has just ballooned like crazy. It's crushing everybody, man.
Oh, sure, it's changed, Pete. Haven't you seen the commercials? Everybody high-fiving each other as they come in and out of the doctor's office and doing a little dance.
It's amazing how I've never done that myself. She says here, it'll also make groceries expensive for families, all while adding trillions to the national debt. Cutting the budget while revenues remain at record highs will add trillions to the national debt. Kansans deserve a budget, writes Sharice Davids, agreed upon by Democrats and Republicans that lower their costs and invest in our economy, not one that forces them to pay more so the ultra-wealthy can get another handout. I mean, it's the same talking points that have been out there for 25 years.
Yeah, it's a template on their Windows program.
It is. Well, nowadays, too, with AI, you can respond to emails now just through AI. Like on Gmail and on Outlook, I'm like always getting the options at the bottom of the email on how I should respond to this. Sometimes they're kind of right. Oftentimes, I'm like, man, you guys are way off on this. But yeah, this is basically just the blueprint that they've been using for 25, 30 years. And I don't think the House GOP is like, a bunch of geniuses here. I really don't. But what I'm seeing on the other side is just the same old tired talking points. And then you got this from the genius out west in California, Maxine Waters.
We're no. Democrats are no on this budget. It is outrageous that you all have the audacity to come here with this budget that harms so many Americans and ask us to support billionaires and think we're going to buy it? You think we're going to support it? Well, you got another thought coming. We ain't doing it.
Yo, baby. That's right.
Show some RESPICT.
There she
Speaking
is.
of millionaires and billionaires there, Maxine. Hello.
Oh, my gosh. Maxine Waters. At least Sharice Davids has the self-awareness to not give crazy speeches like that on the House floor. I will give her that much.
We just eliminated the food tax on the grocery bill, so it's kind of disingenuous to suggest Kansans are going to see an increase at the grocery.
Well, that's a good point, too.
Well, we cut the tax here.
Yeah, and even though that was a state deal, we did do that on behalf of Kansans everywhere.
Relative to Kansans feeling the pain.
Yeah, that's a good point. 913-408-7957. It's good to be here on a Wednesday morning. I put this up on social media last night, and it got some blowback. One of the things in this budget resolution is no tax on tips. Republicans have been big on this. Trump floated it out there during the campaign. I actually think it's a really bad idea, but I am happy to be convinced otherwise. We'll talk about it next. 913-408-7957.
Hey, it's Kevin Keatsman. Stick around. I'm coming up at 10 o'clock right after Pete Mundo on KCMO 95.7 FM.
One of the big things that came out of this House GOP bill that passed last night, 217 to 215, is that there will be no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security. Now, I am as much of an anti-tax guy as anybody else. What we should do, if we really want to simplify the tax code and the tax system, is have a flat tax. Everybody plays whatever it is, 10, 12, 15%. First off, everyone has skin in the game. There's not this like half the population pays zero in taxes deal going on, which is really just a way to buy votes from one political party. We've all got some skin in the game. We're all equals when it comes to what we pay. I think there will be economic benefits from it, but I realize that that's not realistic, sadly. So they extended Donald Trump's tax plan from 2017 last night in this bill that passed the House. Now it goes to the Senate. This was always going to be something that had to be done. But they also added no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security. So I said last night on social media, and I really just wanted to get your feedback, that I think no tax on tips is actually a bad idea. And it will cause issues, especially in the hospitality industry in particular, where already, it's hard enough to find people that want to work in the back of restaurants. People always want to be on the front end where you're getting more of the tips. But now if you're not taxing those tips, that's only going to grow the gap in the hospitality field in particular. Even if you're pooling some of the tips together for people who are busboys and busgirls and things like that, there's going to be a gap there that I don't believe is going to be beneficial for the industry. Now, who is going to be able to use the no tax on tips? Well, people, waiters, bartenders, beauticians, in the traditionally tipped occupations, they're the ones who won't have taxes on tips. But let's be honest, too. And I have not done a good job of this lately. No excuses, but I try to tip in cash when I can. I just haven't had a lot of cash on me lately. Maybe it's having 3 little kids running around that I just don't think about having cash on me as much. But no one pays taxes on cash, tips. And little secret, you shouldn't. As someone who used to work for cash tips, no one pays cash or no one pays taxes on their cash tips. No one does it. So as long as people are paying cash, well, guess what? You're not going to be paying taxes on that anyway. And you shouldn't have to pay taxes on that. I mean, I guess you should, but most people don't do it anyway. So what's the point in this? To me, it's all political posturing is what it is. Steve's in Gladstone. He's on KCMO. First up. What's up, Steve?
Good morning, Pete. How are you?
What's going on, man?
Well, you may be right, political posturing and stuff, but as a person that survived off tips for about 10 years, it's a big thing. I mean, yeah, you work for $5 an hour. I drove a van for a hotel, and also I was a bellboy. And, $5 an hour driving a van back then, that was, standard pay. But the tips really, help pay the rest of the bills. And back then it was all cash. That's great. Now you brought a thing about it's all digital now. No one really tips in cash. And when you said, they don't really tax the tips. Well, yes, they do now because it is digitized.
Yeah.
I mean, when it's digitized, and that's the way the business.
But be honest, Steve, you weren't paying. Steve, you were not paying taxes on all of those cash tips you got. I mean, you weren't, and I don't blame you. I wasn't doing it.
You're misunderstanding me. You're misunderstanding. You're right. I did not back then, but now it's different because most of the tips now are on a credit card or a debit card, and it's run through the register.
Yeah.
And once it's run through the register, it's added up by whoever the manager is, and then at that next paycheck time comes out, they do tax it. They have to because it's all set up on the system, an accounting system.
Mm-hmm.
So
no, that's absolutely right. I mean, that's where I'm very sympathetic to what you're saying there, Steve. I agree with you on that front because it's not like, when you were doing it or even when I was doing it, when it was, more so obviously cash. So I agree and I understand that point completely. But I do think it will create issues in the hospitality field. Real quick, Judy and Bethany, go ahead. You're on KCMO.
Yeah, we didn't get taxed on tips. I waited tables for 10 years, and I got out of it by the time the Reagan administration came along. We did not pay taxes on tips until the Reagan administration. They're the ones that added taxes on tips. And so, yeah, it wasn't until the Reagan administration. This is fairly, considering how many years taxes or tips were, which was to ensure prompt service. Tips were never paid. Taxes were never paid on tips.
Well, here's an interesting angle. Thank you, Judy. Do you do it the way Europe does it? Where really you're not tipping people in that industry, in the hospitality industry. They get paid a salary. Now, I prefer the tipping model, generally speaking, because the one time I was in Europe, the service absolutely blew because there's no incentive for anybody. But that may also just be the culture over there. Unfortunately, we're kind of mirroring Europe in a lot of ways these days, so I'm not sure it's going all that well here. But it's something to think about in the way that the industry operates going forward. Now, who knows if this gets through, if this goes to Trump's desk? That remains to be seen. But it is going to be an angle of this that we need to talk about more going forward.
It's Mundo in the Morning. Now on FM at 95.7. Set a preset on your radio. KCMO Talk Radio.
See, this is a great point. I just want to put a bow on this conversation. Then I'll get to something else happening that I want to get your input on the Missouri side of the state line. Pete, there are people out there making way more money in the hospitality field than I make. Does that mean I don't have to pay taxes either because I'm a W-2 employee? No, that's an excellent point. I mean, you can make a killing in the hospitality field if you work at certain restaurants or certain businesses. And basically you're saying to those people, well, you don't have to pay taxes. But then a regular employee who's trying to maybe build a career, like a police officer or somebody else in manufacturing, they've got to pay taxes when they're making less than some people are in the hospitality field. Picking winners and losers is never the way to make tax policy. Yes, it's politically savvy. I understand why Trump is proposing it. I really do. And I'm all about all of us paying as few taxes as possible. Like, sign me up for that. The best way to do this is just to have a flat tax for everybody. And I know that we are not going to get that anytime soon. But I'm also not going to sit here and cheer this on as the greatest idea ever, because it's still inherently unfair when the government picks winners and losers. And that is part of this. So I see a lot of people, who are like-minded, who vote the same way I do, saying like, yeah, no tax on tips. Woo! I mean, this is amazing. It's like, no, you've just picked different winners and different losers. That's all you've done. And you've also, I think, created some issues within the hospitality field as well in the process. So, I would have voted for this last night if I was in the House. I'm not, going to die on this hill. But I did want to bring it up because all I see is, the one-trick pony. All I see is the same old talking points of this is the greatest thing ever, and no one dare criticize it. If you do, you're a secret Democrat or neocon or I don't know. It's just, all the same old stuff. It's like, no, we could actually have a nuanced conversation about why this may not be the best idea ever. On the text line, Pete, no matter what, taxation is theft. Oh, that's what I'm talking about, brother. That's exactly right. Spot on, my man. Nailed it. Now to the Missouri side of the state line. This is from Mike Kehoe, the governor of the state. He put this up yesterday on social media, and it's not a done deal, but this is trending, I believe, in the right direction. Governor Kehoe saying this is simple. Cell phones have no place in Missouri classrooms. To support stronger academic performance and protect the mental health of students statewide, Missouri needs distraction-free classrooms. That's why I'm urging General Assembly to pass Senator Henderson's Senate Bill 68 to ban electronic communication devices from the beginning to the end of the school day. Now, the state senator, Mike Henderson, responded to this, and he said, I'm grateful for Governor Kehoe's support. Removing cell phones from classrooms are an important tool for the well-being and education of Missouri's kids. Students deserve to learn in distraction-free environments, and this bill is a big step in the right direction. Now, my kids are young. They're 6, 3, and 1. 1 on Monday, actually. So I know that my kids are not in a place where they're using cell phones, and God willing, they are, well, if I had my druthers, 15 years away from it, but holding Claire off till she's 21 on the cell phone probably is a little bit much. It's probably me grasping at straws. Hey, a guy can dream, right? Come on.
Oh, yeah.
Don't get rid of my dream. But I am a huge fan of this. And it's not because I'm a grumpy old man. I mean, John rubs off on me, but not that much. But I even think back to my day when the flip phones were a thing. And we did have flip phones back in high school. But the flip phone was not a computer in your pocket. The flip phone was like learning how to T9 text. There was nothing you could really do outside of play. What was that game on the old Nokias? Was it Snake?
Snake.
Nothing like a game of Snake to pass the time on the old Nokia phones. Oh, man.
That's why you're always in the bathroom a little bit longer.
Speak for yourself
playing
there,
some
Mark.
Snake.
Oh, playing some Snake on the old T9 phones. That was minor league compared to what the phones obviously are now. And I do not envy any high school teacher in Missouri, Kansas, or across America who's got to try to keep the focus for these kids on the schoolwork when they've got computers in their pockets where they can do whatever they want. So this is not being the grumpy old man. I know some of you are going to say that it is. I think it's just common sense. And as someone who's got little kids, who is, a few years away from having to have this conversation, God willing, I don't want my kids or their peers being able to have cell phones in the classrooms. Now, the pushback on Governor Kehoe, and you know that this is where the conversation is going to go, right? What if there's a school shooting and my kid can't contact me in, God forbid, a school shooting situation? That is a tragic thing to have to think about. I think it's a reality, sadly, that is in the back of every parent's minds. But we don't live our lives and we don't create rules based on the 1 in a million scenario. We don't. And despite what the media will tell you, it still is that 1 in a million scenario. You cannot build legislation or laws based on the 1 in a million scenario. You just can't do it.
It's sort of a false nomer that your kid needs to contact you. I mean, the school has enough trouble with everybody rushing the scene. We've had those incidents before. We're like, calm down, we're doing the best we can here. So I get that you want to know that your kid's safe, but it does bring up a whole bunch of other issues.
It brings up a lot of problems. And the schools are now built to basically have alert systems out there. I mean, that's their job. It's not your kid's job necessarily to text you in, God forbid, some kind of a scenario like that. But the more important conversation is what's best for the learning of the kids. And there's no way you can make the case that the learning of the kids, and by the way, the learning has gone off the cliff. I mean, we talk about it with the guys at the Show Me Institute. We've talked about it with our friends at the Kansas Policy Institute. The learning, I got so worked up, I started smacking the microphone around back here. It flipped on me. But the learning of the kids, you sit there and you say to yourself, they're failing miserably. They're not doing the job, and it's not the teacher's fault. I don't blame the teachers for this. They've got more distractions than ever. A lot of them were still stepped back during COVID. And now you're going to tell me, hey, what's the best way to do this? Get the cell phones out of the classrooms. It's a no-brainer. Mike is a teacher out of Olathe. Mike, what do you make of this proposal and support from Governor Kehoe on the Missouri side?
No, he's right. I'm about to go in the classroom. Dude, I've told my kids this, and we practiced. The last thing I want is you to have a cell phone. When they're nervous and stressed and they're all of a sudden making noise or possibly distracting or bringing attention to where we're at, we're trying to lay low and stay quiet and be hidden. The last thing they need to be having is something that might bring attention to where we are. We're trying to keep them safe and get them the heck out of there as soon as possible or hunker down. The last thing we want is them to have a device that they're going to be nervous about and using that might bring attention to where we're at. That's the wrong approach. Having them away is the right approach.
How big of an issue, I don't know how long you've been teaching, but how big of an issue have these phones become in the classroom?
Well, this is the first year at the school I'm at. I had them shut down last year, and a few of us did. Now everybody's got them in a sleeve at the front of the room, and it's beautiful. Kids are communicating. And when they're not, when we're done with the work, they communicate or they work or they just have quiet time. And it's a blessing because it's benefiting them. They've really adapted well here where I'm at.
What grade do you teach?
I teach sophomores, a couple of seniors and juniors in one class, but it's sophomore English.
Okay. Wow. Well, so now, and is that just your classroom policy or is that the school policy to have the phones in the sleeve at the front of the classroom when they walk in?
School policy. It's mandated this year, and it hasn't been a problem. You know what? Fewer fights because there's fewer teeing up the fight that's going to happen in the commons. It's all these things. We've had almost 0 fights this year, and I think a lot of the bullying crap and the setting it up and all this other garbage that leads to conflict in between classes, it's been eliminated just by having the cell phones away because you can't bully, you can't tee it up, you can't meet your girlfriend in the bathroom, all that kind of stuff.
Wow. I didn't think about all the other benefits. Nice job there, Mike. Well done, buddy. That's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, the old days, you had to hear about the fights word of mouth. And then you might be like, dang, I missed out on it. No one told me about the fight after school.
We used to have smoke signals when I was a kid.
Oh, that's great. And the other thing that Mike noted there that I think is important, and he's right, is that kids get stressed. They get worked up about something in the classroom. They go to their phones. They go for that cheap dopamine hit. And listen, we've all done it. I've noticed it. I get stressed out with the kids. Something happens. I just walk away. What do? You pick up your phone. And you just get a quick dopamine hit. It's one thing for me as an adult to do that, recognize what's going on, and realize like that's not the best way to handle any situation. But what are you going to tell and do with a 16-year-old who doesn't have a fully developed brain? I mean, every state should be passing this. Now, it sounds like a lot of schools are doing this on their own, but state legislatures in Missouri and Kansas should be looking at this. I mean, who's going to be against this? Big cell phone? The cell phone lobby? I don't even know if that exists. Just do it. 913-408-7957. Mark Alford is going to be here just after 8 o'clock. Talk about the bill that passed in the House of Representatives last night, 217 to 215, and what it ultimately means in this budget process going forward. 95.7 FM KCMO.
Hump Day on the Guy Benson Show. Great lineup for you. The border czar from the Trump administration. Tom Homan is here talking about his important work coming up at 2 o'clock on KCMO.
So this is now an argument on the right side of the aisle I'm seeing in Missouri with Governor Kehoe supporting a bill. It's not yet law, but supporting a bill banning cell phones in classrooms. You got people on the left saying, well, if there's, God forbid, a school shooting, my kid needs the phone to contact me. As a teacher just noted here on the show, that actually can cause more chaos and confusion. Now, on the right side, some of what I'm seeing on my social media is people saying that students are catching teachers in acts they shouldn't be doing. This makes kids more vulnerable, and it makes them targets. Well, that's also a pretty rare occurrence, and there's no evidence that a cell phone would be the thing that would definitely make it so these teachers are caught doing or saying things that might be inappropriate.
Well, and cell phones, as we know, don't capture the whole thing. People take out their phone as something's already started.
Well, that's true, too.
So would these people then be in favor of classroom cameras rather than this cell phone as a solution?
Yeah. I mean, that's
or would that invade their privacy?
Well, that's the age-old question, right? How much is too much?
How libertarian are you?
Yeah. That's a good point. Jonathan in Kansas City, go ahead, my man. You're on KCMO.
I think a lot of the concerns and fear mongering that, we need phones because of this and that. It's almost like we act like, there was never a time where we did, Columbine, the threat of school shootings, that goes back to the late 90s, before we had mass cell phones, and we figured out a way to make schools safer after that incident occurred without needing cell phones. Could there be challenges? Yes. But the whole thing is, if there's a school shooting, and what are they supposed to do? They're going to call the parents. There's nothing the parents can do. If they go over to the school, they're going to be like, you can't go in. It's a lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's a totally meaningless exercise where it's like, okay, you tell me something is going on. Like if I was the parent, I'd be like, okay, I will pray. I would obviously get emotional about it, but there's nothing I can do.
Mm-hmm.
So
you're not going in there like John Wayne.
Trust the authorities.
Yep, no, that's true. And one of the big issues has been the worst of the worst have been the failures of the authorities, right? Like the ones down in what was that tragedy? Maybe 3 years ago.
Parkland.
No. Down in Texas, Uvalde.
Uvalde.
I mean, that was a complete and utter failure by authorities.
Well, Parkland was a failure too. Remember, Governor DeSantis fired that cop because he wouldn't go in and respond.
Yeah, that's a good point. You're right about that. All right, thank you, Jonathan. Well done. On the text line, Pete, I don't necessarily disagree with taking away cell phones, but before we spend all the legislative time and energy on changing student behavior, let's spend some time and energy on fixing our failing educational system itself. This is like trying to fix the doorbell on a house with a roof that's falling in. I appreciate a good analogy, but what if this is part of the issue?
Seems to me.
What if this is actually a small part of the solution that can't possibly be fixed overnight? And there's a lot of different angles to this, but if you've got kids in classrooms who are not focused, in part because they're on their phones, and the teachers have very little control over this, well, this is one way to get kids to at least maybe pretend to possibly focus in the classroom a little bit more. I'm not saying that suddenly the direction of Missouri educational system is going to vastly improve, but it may be a small step in the right direction. So to use your housing analogy, you're starting to fix the foundation here. You're finding the cracks in the foundation and fixing them one by one, rather than just slapping a new coat of paint on the house.
You hit the nail on the head because it's a solution that deals with the end product of what we're trying to improve, the students.
Yeah.
We can debate on whether we need 5 assistant principals and save the money there and all that good stuff, but let's deal with the students.
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt about it. I'll leave you this hour with something President Trump said yesterday. He got these new hats delivered to the Oval Office. Did you see this? It's big old red hats, MAGA-looking hats. But the hat says, Trump was right about everything. And he tried to give these hats out to members of the press yesterday in the Oval Office. And take a listen to what this sounded like.
Give me all of them. Look. See that? Trump was right about everything. It just came in. Somebody said, I said, this was sent in by a fan. I said, I think we should make some of them, right? But we were pretty much. You want one? Are you allowed to take one? Because he'll consider it. I know him well. He's sort of a stiff. Yeah, Brian, you're not a stiff. You're sort of a stiff guy. He'll take other things, but not a free hand.
Always say yes to the president. Always say yes to the president.
Would anybody like one?
Oh, man, that is just vintage right there.
He's sort of a stiff.
That may have to be a new drop on the show when I got a caller being a stiff. You know, there's plenty of that out there. My goodness, lighten up there, Francis. Don't be a stiff on me now. Don't be a stiff on the show. We don't
Trump offers quid pro quo.
Yeah. AP headline coming in hot this morning. Speaking of stiffs.
Sort of a stiff.
Yeah, that is vintage stiff, the Associated Press goobers, no doubt about it. So what is this House bill that passed last night, 217 to 215 by the GOP? What does it actually mean going forward? Mark Alford will join us on that coming up next. Well, they got it done last night. 217 to 215 was the vote. Republicans passing their budget plan. Mark Alford, Missouri's 4th Congressional District, is here on KCMO. He was obviously a yes vote on this. Thomas Massey out of Kentucky, the only no vote on the GOP side. Congressman, good morning. It is great to have you back. I know it's been a very busy week. So what does this ultimately mean for the American people with this bill passing, and what happens from here?
Well, Pete, it means help is on the way. We are one step closer. Now we can get on the dance floor with the U.S. Senate in this reconciliation process where we do not need to have a filibuster-proof vote of 60 in the Senate. Now that we have a majority in the Senate, it is a simple majority vote. They have done their version. We have done our version. Now this House resolution goes back to the individual authorizing committees, Energy and Commerce, Labor. Every committee chair is committed to making certain cuts. We are raising defense by $100 billion. But other than that, pretty much every other authorizing committee is going to have hearings. Everyone will be welcome to say their piece, and we will find the cuts necessary to offset the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which we must pass in this reconciliation process, or it is going to mean an average of more than $2,000 in tax increases, not for millionaires and billionaires, but for the average person listening today. It would be the largest tax increase in U.S. history.
Okay, so this is really a big part of this is extending the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
Okay.
And
now,
we've got to get that done under the reconciliation process because we don't have a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate.
Yeah. So you can't get the 60 votes. But can you make it permanent, or are we just extending this for another how many years?
This is going to be an extension. There's things that just can't be made permanent under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. One of the things we really can't touch is Social Security and Medicare. And we're not intending on making any cuts on those. We are looking at savings under Medicaid, as I've said before. That will go through Energy and Commerce. These savings that we're going to provide to the American people, roughly $880 billion, $880 million over each year, and that adds up for a 10-year how it's scored. But this is going to be going after the waste, abuse, and fraud and making sure that if you're an able-bodied American and you don't have dependent children, that you're not on Medicaid.
Mm-hmm. Now, let me ask you this. You said $100 billion increase for defense. I thought DOGE was going to go through the Defense Department, which I think they should do for every department, and actually try to find reduction in spending. What's the justification for increasing spending in defense when we don't even know how much waste is already in the Defense Department?
Well, it has to be done on the front end by the authorizing committee, which I used to be on, the Armed Services. There are some programs that we are looking at increasing, and when DOGE comes in and finds decreases, or Pete Hegseth, the new Secretary of Defense, does another audit to try to get the books right at the Pentagon, that figure will come down. But the authorization of an extra $100 billion, I have not talked with Chairman Rogers on this. I know one thing they're looking at. Senator Schmidt from Missouri is pushing this, and I will be as well, increasing the number of the B-21 Raiders that are coming, many of those to Whiteman Air Force Base. Right now, we're contracted at 100 of these to be built. The General Cotton, who's over Global Strike Command, has said that they really want 147, and Senator Schmidt, I understand, is pushing for 200 of these to be built. The greatest deterrent ever to Communist China and the aggression that we are facing on the world front.
So let me ask you this. I see the headlines here read that the House passed plan calls for $1.5 to $2 trillion in spending reductions over a decade. So that's over 10 years. That's about, $200 billion a year as we run a $2 trillion annual deficit. So how does this work from the standpoint of we've got a major fiscal problem here? You've talked about the $36 trillion in debt, but if my math is right, $200 billion, that's 1/10 of what we actually need to be cutting on an annual basis. So how does the rest of it happen?
A large part of that is the interest that we pay on our national debt, which is well over, I think, almost $1.5 trillion a year now, outpacing our defense spending. And a lot of that is due to the high interest rates brought about by Joe Biden and his irresponsible economic policies. Once we get our spending under control and the bond market starts seeing us in action, actually reducing our deficit, the bond market is going to signal, and that is going to make sure that the Fed gets in line and these interest rates start coming down. And then that is going to relieve pressure on our payments. And you're going to start seeing, it's going to be slow. It's not going to be one fell swoop. But I predict within the next 6 months to a year, you're going to be seeing a significant reduction in our deficit.
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw the number was like $700 billion a year in interest that's being paid right now. And that's a big number. It's never going to be zero because we've got this debt. So
right.
What do we, I mean, what's a realistic goal, though, here? Because people get excited about DOGE. Certainly I am. I know you are. But then we want to see what it means actually on the back end. Do you feel like we can get this deficit under $1 trillion? I mean, I'm not expecting net positive here, but what's a realistic goal when you look at these plans?
Well, look, I know a lot of people want a balanced budget. That would be my ultimate goal. I think that's a bit idealistic at this point. Yeah. But there are projections that in 10 years, we're going to be at a $60 trillion debt or $57 trillion. Mm-hmm. It is simply unsustainable. We cannot operate like that. So every trillion that we can bring it down, it is going to have a positive impact, and the momentum will start building to start whittling this debt down. If you've ever taken a Dave Ramsey class, it's the same principle. We're putting money in an envelope and not putting it on the credit card. And that's the way we have to start thinking as Americans. We take in $5 trillion a year and we spend $7 trillion. It's simply unsustainable.
Well, I would argue you guys are just putting less on the credit card, which is really not where we need to be. But I do understand the premise, and we need to get back to that. But right now, we're just putting less on the credit card, in fairness, correct?
Yeah, we're putting less on the credit card, and we're making bigger payments on the debt that we have, and we're bringing down the interest rate. So if you've got a Citibank card and you're paying 22% interest, it's almost like refinancing the debt, getting it on another, and bringing it down to like a 6% under a home equity line of credit.
Mark Alford's here on KCMO. Could we get your response here? Congresswoman Sharice Davids on the Kansas side wrote yesterday on X that the president and the House GOP's Medicaid cuts would hurt families, close hospitals, and take away from seniors and people with disabilities. She writes, I'm working to protect and expand Medicaid. How would you respond to your counterpart on the Kansas side of the state line?
I would say, what Medicaid cuts? There are no cuts in the House resolution that we voted on. The Medicaid's not even mentioned. Now, we do realize that we're going to have to find savings in Medicaid through the Energy and Commerce Committee. And we've talked about those, but those aren't cuts. That's getting rid of waste, abuse, and fraud. If you consider making sure that only able-bodied Americans who have no dependent children are not on Medicaid, and you want to call that a cut, I guess that's a cut. But I think the average American would say, hey, that sounds pretty reasonable. We need to provide this money to people who actually need it, just like the food stamp SNAP program, $34 million a day in waste, abuse, and fraud. We need to have able-bodied Americans not living off the government, being helped out for a temporary time, but not turning it into a lifestyle. These programs are life vests.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of members of the House, I also have to get this response from you to Maxine Waters out of California.
We're no.
Oh, good.
Democrats are no on this budget. It is outrageous that you all have the audacity to come here with this budget that harms so many Americans and ask us to support billionaires and think we're going to buy it? You think we're going to support it? Well, you got another thought coming. We ain't doing it.
All right. Your response to Maxine Waters.
Oh, my favorite member of Congress.
I knew it.
I'll be nice. Look, these are lies and gaslighting to the American people. When Elizabeth Warren, Maxine Waters, and others say we're making cuts for millionaires and billionaires, that is not true. It's many small businesses in the Kansas City area, business owners who are listening to you right now, who take advantage of the qualified business deduction so that small businesses in Kansas City and in the 4th Congressional District can have the same tax rate as large corporations. If we do not keep it that way, there will be small businesses go out of business because of the high input costs that we are now facing. We must preserve this. It's called the 199A. You can Google it. It is a qualified business deduction. It would take a 20% payment on your taxes up to well over 43%. And that is unsustainable for the average business in America.
Mark Alford, Missouri's 4th Congressional District, working hard, busy week there in Congress. We appreciate you getting back on the show there, Congressman. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. God bless.
All right. Mark Alford on KCMO. Good to have him on as always. 8:15. Happy Wednesday. Patrick Tuohey's in studio, bottom of the hour. Talk about the stadiums with him and where that conversation goes from here. But coming up, I mean, they just can't help themselves. They really just can't help themselves. I saw this from a local TV station on the IRS employee layoffs here in Kansas City, and I couldn't help but think, where were you 5 years ago? I'll explain next.
If it's happening in KCMO, it's on KCMO 95.7 FM. Here's Pete Mundo.
Why are we holding the hands of about 100 government employees and acting like, oh my gosh, how are we going to all help these people get work as quickly as possible? What are we doing here?
You're sort of a stiff.
No, I'm not being a stiff. I'm not being a stiff. I'm not. I'm just asking the question because I'm seeing these stories, and I saw this last night on Channel 9, KMBC. They did a whole package, including a conversation with one of the IRS employees who was let go in Kansas City. And they're like, oh, man, we got to get these people help. They're scrambling for financial security. Oh, my gosh. Welcome to the real world. I know you might have thought that your government job was just going to be there forever, and you were on a list now of workers who could never lose their job. You had security till the day you wanted to stop working. Welcome to the real world. But the media is furthering this narrative. And this one, I mean, I'm just sitting here like, where were you guys during COVID? Where were you guys when people were getting their businesses shut down? They were trying to stay afloat. You had candle shops, in Olathe who were defying the orders to try to make a living. And you guys lambasted them. Now 100 workers lose their job at the IRS, and they got financial advisors on Channel 9 being like, well, go talk to an advisor. It's free, and, try to save some money. You mean the things that regular private sector employees live with and think about every single day? Here's the report from Channel 9.
Yeah, Chris, we spoke with an IRS worker. He was laid off a week ago. He got his last paycheck. He used it for rent and bills. Financial advisors can step in and help navigate this nerve-wracking time.
When I saw the parade of managers come in, I kind of knew that the writing was on the wall.
An IRS worker for just 3 weeks in small business collections.
I don't have savings. I'm one of many that just don't.
And Jasper Hudgens Bradley was a casualty of cuts.
I gave myself the space to just have a few bad days and be angry out of the public view. And now I'm kind of just, okay, back to work.
You don't have to do this alone.
Financial advisors in our area say when you lose your job,
I thought I'd at least have longer.
It's time to lock down every dollar.
Your monthly expenses and really determine what are your core expenses, your non-negotiables, and what are some areas in your budget that you can really cut back.
Yeah, this isn't rocket science. It's like every night at 10 o'clock, Dave Ramsey talks about this right here on KCMO. This is stuff that regular people will think about every single day. But we've now got 2-minute news reports on local TV because 100 people lost their jobs at the IRS.
I know we don't teach it in schools, but it would be useful. And it's not something that you come across until it happens to you, right? That's kind of
true.
the way we do it. But we don't ever really talk about what you should do, or people don't pay attention. So, well, I didn't have any savings. That's not your former employee's issue.
No.
Again, you suddenly realize what's important, and all of a sudden you've got to start stacking pennies.
Yes. No, you're right. I mean, that's a broader conversation on how personal finance should be taught in like high school is a very good point.
And then it wouldn't be a news story at 10.
Well, it wouldn't be.
With adults.
No, it wouldn't be. The thing that bothers me about it is how we literally have taken 100 people who lost their jobs, and we've spun this into 15 different stories where, what happened when 300 workers lost their jobs at the Clay Como plant? Were they doing stories about how, oh, man, this is the personal finance stuff you should be doing? No, we weren't doing it then. So why are we doing it now? I mean, I have sympathy and empathy for anyone who loses a job. But at the same time, the way this is getting overblown, over 100 workers in a metro of 2.5 million people, where now we're doing personal finance stories and one-on-one interviews. Like, I was in small business collections, but I was only there for 3 weeks, and I got blown out, and I've got no money in the bank. Okay, how many other people in Kansas City are going to lose their private sector jobs this week who are in the same situation, who no one's going to interview on TV? Because they're not fitting the political narrative of a story that they want to tell. And that is why this is happening.
I've got a news story idea.
Oh, go ahead.
Former government employees' frustration with government employees. Right? Wait till you call the unemployment office, right?
Yeah.
It's 9 a.m. Thank you for calling the unemployment office. Our hours are 8 to 5. I know it's 9, Your call is important to us. Please hang on,
Well, here's the thing, John. They'll blame that on Trump, too. That's what they'll do. That'll all be, it's all going to be somehow Trump's fault. That'll be the next iteration of this news story, right?
Mm-hmm.
They'll be calling up the unemployment office, pissed off, and then somehow it'll all tie back to
how it all really works.
Orange Man Bad. Our buddy Daniel Turner at Power of the Future, they're an energy organization. He's out of Washington, D.C. He's on the show all the time. He put up on X 17 minutes ago. Here's the truth about Doge layoffs. Everyone in D.C., and I do mean everyone, knows government employees who joke about doing nothing, watching movies, on vacation without using paid time off, saying they're, quote, remote, end quote, days-long conferences in Vegas with 0 meetings at the pool all day. I mean, sounds pretty nice, right? Get all these government goobers in their Speedos out in Vegas, sitting poolside, drinking a margarita. That's quite a sight to behold.
I'm not worth your Red Lobster money.
Come on. Yeah, I don't want to see it. Maybe Mark does. He's been very quiet this morning, but I don't. No thanks.
No, I'm good.
Yeah, I know you are. But that's the truth. Does that mean there's going to be some people who are probably doing good work that lose their jobs? Yes. But as we just talked to Mark Alford about, $2 trillion annual deficit, $36 trillion in debt. My goodness, this is unsustainable. And something does have to be done, and this is just one small part of it. Are the stadium supporters playing politics instead of presenting a clear stadium plan? Our good friend Patrick Tuohey of the Show Me Institute is in studio on that next.
Hey, it's Kevin Keatsman. Stick around. I'm coming up at 10 o'clock right after Pete Mundo on KCMO 95.7 FM.
Here he is in studio, Patrick Tuohey with the Show Me Institute on 95.7 FM. He's actually going to be filling in for Keatsman coming up on Friday, so make sure you tune in to that. You excited, my man?
I'm very excited. This is fun.
Well, it's exciting, too, because you filled in for me. Now you only have to do 25% of the work, 1 hour.
That's right.
That's a it's a lot different, right?
It's baby steps. I appreciate the dipping in the toe, the being on when people are on vacation, hour at a time. Like, it is interesting, but as a listener, I didn't appreciate how many different things there are to keep track of all at once. It's keeping the conversation flowing, it's keeping an eye on the clock, and then you have to do the additional stuff of callers and text line, and thankfully I didn't have to deal with that last time.
Well, you're going to do a great job, so we'll look forward to hearing you coming up in a couple of days. So you wrote an article here for the Kansas City Star, guest commentary, Are stadium supporters playing politics instead of presenting a clear stadium plan? And this mostly surrounds, I think, the Royals versus the Chiefs. But what was your thesis here on this article that you wrote for the Star?
So the Missouri Speaker of the House, Patterson, had a press conference the other day and said, look, the teams need to make their asks, and then the state is going to wait to hear what Jackson County does. And I said, or it made me realize that, again, all paths to a new stadium for the Royals go through Jackson County. They are not going to be able to do this without Jackson County's participation. And despite their desire, they are not going to be able to avoid a public vote. It's been almost a year since the effort to increase sales taxes to pay for a downtown stadium was defeated by a wide margin. And it feels as if they haven't figured out what they want. Every once in a while, we get a media story about somebody's hired a PR firm or they're looking at this, but that is all just that's all just background noise. Until the Royals come forward with their ask, we're all just wasting our time.
Unless they run into the arms of the state of Kansas.
Possible, but if that were... Look, the only people that know the financials of this deal are the Royals. They know what they want to spend on a new park, and they understand the finances of what's around them. If the Star bonds in Kansas were viable, they would already be in conversation. But I don't think Kansas can make as compelling an offer as Missouri with Jackson County can. Again, that's not great news for taxpayers, but Missouri is much more able to offer them a deal. It feels like they are still kind of upset with Frank White. But look, they didn't lose because of Frank White. Frank White played a minimal role in that campaign.
Well, you're right. I mean, Frank White was obviously against the sales tax extension last year, and he did a little victory lap as if, like, the people were on his side. Trust me, Frank White is far less popular in Jackson County than the Kansas City Royals are. He had nothing to do with it. He just happened to be the blind squirrel that found the nut.
Right, but to his credit, he demanded of the Royals details, right? We want a lease agreement. We want all these things set in place, and the Royals just refused to do it. They thought they could roll him at the ballot box, and they got their hat handed to him. I get it. There are elected leaders that they don't want to deal with. I'm sure that's true of anybody with business before a city, but that's the politician you've got. You've got to play nice. You've got to negotiate a deal, and spending a year kind of with your head in the sand, and now it seems like Royal supporters are trying to fund the recall effort of Frank White isn't going to get you where you need to be. It's wasting time.
I totally see what you're saying on the team having its head in the sand. I also would say Frank's had his head in the sand for a long time on this stuff, too. He has not been exactly proactive on trying to figure out what to do to keep the teams in Jackson County.
I don't like that, keep the teams in Jackson County. Look, they are a business. They want taxpayer money. Fine. Stand up. Tell us what you want. Include details. Pete, we don't even know what a park will cost. We don't even know what a park will cost. You've got to start there. Say what you want. And look, this isn't just Patrick Tuohey saying it. Governor Parsons said the same thing. Mayor Lucas has said the same thing. The team needs to come forward, and they just don't want to. I think years ago they thought that they were just going to say, we want a new park, and municipalities would fall all over themselves in a bidding war, Clay County and Jackson and Kansas. But it hasn't really happened. And again, the best deal for the Royals, and I think they realize this, is staying in Jackson County and getting taxpayers to vote for a sales tax. Why they haven't come to terms with that, I don't understand.
Well, I wonder, too, if they're trying to figure out a way to avoid the taxpayer by cutting a backdoor deal with the city of Kansas City, Missouri.
I don't know that Kansas City can generate enough money to
I don't
pay
think they can, but it doesn't mean they won't try.
Sure, but they still have to go through Jackson County, and it's still going to require a vote of the people of Jackson County. And pouting and getting upset doesn't change that fact.
Because I think Quentin Lucas knows his, for better or for worse, for right or for wrong, his reputation will be the guy who lost the teams, whether that's a fair way to describe it or not. So he's going to do everything in his power, even if it might be a little dicey, to keep them, try to keep them.
No, I think Quentin Lucas won't be remembered for much. I mean, I kind of think of him as just the mayor of a Midwestern city. The team will come or go or do whatever it does. We will be remembered for what happened with the team. It won't be because this politician got in the way or something like that. Again, the issues are too big, and a 16-point loss is too big dependent on one particular thing. If this had been a squeaker, if it had been 1%, maybe it would be smart to go after elected officials and try to get them recalled or something like that. But when you lose by 16 points, everything went wrong.
Yeah, you got bigger problems. That's absolutely true. Patrick Tuohey, Show Me Institute's here. He wrote a piece in the Star, Our Stadium Supporters Playing Politics Instead of Presenting a Clear Stadium Plan. So you mentioned a group, the Heavies, the Constructor Union, or Constructor, what would you call them?
Business association, a group of large developers, construction firms. They stand to make gobs of money from a big construction project. And they, in addition to kind of funneling money to Quentin Lucas, KCUR reported that they paid for his Super Bowl tickets a year ago, and presumably
I think that wasn't that the Kansas Reflector or the Missouri Independent?
Originally reported, KCUR broadcasted as well. So they are not only playing nice with Quentin Lucas by giving him money, but they are running the recall effort of Frank White. And again, that suggests to me that even supporters of the Royals understand that they have got to go through Jackson County. Again, they want to maybe get rid of the person they sit across the table from in negotiations, and I understand that. But even if they are successful in recalling White, I don't think that helps them sell this, because whoever replaces White is immediately going to be seen as a patsy.
But it's long been believed, too, that the Chiefs would just want to get the Royals out of there and potentially collect all the tax dollars for themselves.
Sure. Again, I have no particular insight into what's going on inside the camps of either team. I think the Chiefs could easily get a new sales tax to stay where they are and do whatever repairs to Arrowhead they want to do, although they seem to be dragging their feet getting ready for FIFA. But they can do that. Really, the argument is, what are the Royals going to do? And if they know, they're not telling us. And it's been so long, I think they just don't know.
I'm just hearing more and more about this Sprint Center campus idea and somewhere in Johnson County. And that Johnson County and Overland Park are going to bend over backwards for them.
Yeah, again, so here's the thing. The stadiums never pay for themselves, even for the ownership. They never pay for themselves. What you need, and we see this around the country, is you need all sorts of economic activity around the park, the hotels, so that you can vacuum up all that tax revenue, right? Sales tax, property tax, income tax, if it were in Kansas, or forgive me, if it were in Kansas City, and divert that to the project. So if you drop a stadium in the middle of a cornfield, you don't have that development around you to generate the money to pay for the stadium. So they can't just go to Sprint campus. They need to go somewhere that's got a lot of economic activity around them so that they create that broader district that captures all that economic activity, which is why Sherman wanted to build an entertainment district in the Crossroads. God love them. The Sprint Center doesn't have the commerce around them that could support it.
Well, if they include the Starbond district to include like Town Center, and then all of a sudden these additional tax revenues.
Okay, so
I agree with, I know where you're going here. I'm just saying, if you draw, that's the thing about these Starbond districts, right? You just make up the district and then you say, all the additional tax revenues go into the stadium.
And that is a huge cost to taxpayers to lose out on that revenue, to return it back to the developers. But again, the first thing we need to see, because this is all just smoke and mirrors. You and I have no idea of the details because the Royals won't do the first thing, which is say, here is what we want. Once we know what they want, then you and I can have all sorts of educated conversations about what's practicable, what will work, what will taxpayers support. But right now, they won't tell us, and the clock is ticking. We were told a year ago this is so important to start, and yet it's been silence on the details since then.
Hey, they got concrete cancer, man. You got to be careful going out there these days. Might have
That's dangerous.
piece of concrete falling on your head with that cancer
It's
they're
such
dealing
an
with. I just don't know if it's, is it stage 0 cancer? Is it stage 5? I mean, it really just depends.
Wear your mask.
Yeah. So why do you think they are being so coy on this, the Royals? Is it because they don't know or they don't want to share?
It certainly could be they don't know. My guess is that they do know. They do know that they're going to have to sit down and deal with Jackson County, which is why their supporters are trying to get rid of Frank White. I think they are waiting on a recall effort, which could happen as soon as June or early July.
Yeah.
Sherman said the other day, mid-year, well, maybe he's waiting on a recall effort. But again, I think they understand that, and I suspect there's just some bruised ego up at the top that don't want to move forward until they've exacted some political revenge on Frank White. But Kansas City can't do it by itself. I don't think Kansas's deals can work for them.
Well, I've never thought that Kansas's deals really can work. I don't know how you generate that kind of money off of a star bond district to pay off those bonds. So I don't see how it's like, free money to the team like a sales tax is.
Yes, correct. And so
Okay.
that is why, months after Kansas came forward with this star bond offer. Again, if it were a good deal, if it made sense for the Royals, they'd already be breaking ground.
Yeah.
They want this, but it doesn't work. Kansas doesn't work for the Royals. Again, I think they know they have to stay in Jackson County or deal with Jackson County, and they don't want to. And so maybe they're hoping that something will change. I am beginning to think, here's a crazy hot take.
Oh, here we go. Tee 'em up.
I am
Let's
beginning
see.
to think it is more likely that they re-up and stay at the K at this point than they break ground in the next 10 years. I suspect maybe some of the owners will come to Sherman and say, let's just punt this for 10 years. This has been such a nightmare. And then we'll renew for 10 years, and then in 10 years, we'll have this conversation all over again. But this has been such a clown show and still is a clown show because they won't tell us what they want.
And would they then still try to get a sales tax extension for the two stadiums out there for another few years?
Well, that's a good point. So they're committed right now until 2030
Yeah,
and 2031
31 or something.
So again, they need years to build a stadium. They tell
Yeah.
us. So maybe they say, look, let's just punt till 2041.
Yeah.
And renew until 2041, and then maybe in 2030, 2032, we'll come back and start talking about this again. But I think again, this loss was so bad, and they have angered so many people that even if John Sherman were elected county executive, I don't know that the county would look at a deal that is perhaps just as bad as it was last time and vote any differently.
Patrick Tuohey, Show Me Institute. Great work. Good column there in the Star. And
Thank you.
We'll hear you on Friday, filling in for Kevin Keatsman.
It'll be great. Thank
All
you.
right, great stuff. What If Wednesday? 3 questions from John Anthony to wrap up the hour next.
Hey, it's Dan Bongino. You're listening to Pete Mundo on KCMO Talk Radio, now on FM at 95.7.
Rolling till 9 o'clock on KCMO. Let's get right to it on a Wednesday morning.
KCMO Talk Radio, now on FM at 95.7. It's time for What If Wednesday.
What if, instead of having you on this radio station, there was somebody else?
All right, John Anthony, what do you got for me, my man?
What if no tax on tips is actually a bad idea?
Then the House GOP should stop bragging about it. I know that it's cool during the campaign to talk about, but even when it came up during the campaign with Trump, I was kind of like, yeah, I'm not sure about this one. I mean, why should somebody who makes $50,000 a year in a tip industry not pay taxes on the bulk of their income, while someone who's just a regular W-2 employee at a corporation or as a manufacturer pay their taxes, their income taxes on their salary? Like, why should we be in the business of bragging about the government picking winners and losers? Why should we be basically appealing to a specific industry when it comes to who we tax and who we don't? I know it sounds good, but to me, it's still largely political posturing. It's not me being a tax guy. I mean, I put this up on social media. It's like, righto, neocon. It's like, what are you talking about? I can't stand taxes, but that's why we should just have a flat tax where everybody pays the same percentage of income tax. No ifs, ands, or buts. You know, and I know that people who are accountants aren't going to like this because it would be a major simplification of the tax code, which would put accountants out of business. And I've got good friends who are accountants, so I don't want that. But think about how much simpler you could make the tax code if everyone just paid 10, 12, 15% of their taxes to the government, whatever the number is that makes sense. And then you just, there's no write-offs, there's no nothing. Everyone just pays their 10, 15%, and we move on with our day. Wouldn't be good for the accounting industry, but I think it'd be a lot better for most people, John.
What if the media's alleged Doge targets, in other words, we're going to take money from SNAP and Medicare and gut them. What if the media's alleged Doge targets are not actual specified Doge targets?
Well, that would mean the media is, dare I say, lying to us?
Talk about a bombshell.
Oh, my goodness gracious, a dishonest media.
How dare you?
Oh, gosh. Cry me a river. Yeah, I mean, this is always how it goes. And I think most people are seeing through the charade. But it's like this House GOP budget that passes yesterday, they're cutting $2 trillion over 10 years. That's actually not that much. It's $200 billion a year. We're running $2 trillion annual deficits. That's chump change. But of course, the minute you bring up the idea of cuts to anything, it's like, oh, poor people are going hungry. Oh, boy, not going to have their food stamp. No, Department of Agriculture has to make cuts. SNAP benefits, i.e. food stamps, are under that umbrella. It doesn't necessarily have to come from food stamps. Although, of course, we should make sure we're rooting out the fraud and abuse of food stamps. I know a couple of people in particular, and it wasn't their fault. They were on food stamps for a bit. They got off of them, and they tried to get off of them. They couldn't get off of them. They were calling up being like, I got a job. Leave me off of this stuff. And the government couldn't figure out how to get them off food stamps. What's next?
What if anyone other than Frank White were in the lead in these stadium deals?
You know, honestly, we just talked about this with Tuohey. I'm not convinced much would be different right now. I'm not. We might be closer to another vote, but I'm not convinced the vote would go all that differently. As Patrick and I talked about, I mean, the vote went down last year in Jackson County by 16 points. It wasn't close. It wasn't because of one person or one thing. Frank White can act like he helped get the vote knocked down. That's not true. A lot of reasons it didn't work out. But I don't think we'd be in a much different place without Frank. Maybe a little bit further down the road, but not a lot different. There's your What If Wednesday. It's good to be here on a Wednesday morning on KCMO 95.7 FM, streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. We got an hour to go. till Kevin Keat's been uncanceled coming up at 10. This is something that won't have legs beyond tomorrow. Heck, it may end today. But I did want to bring it up with an hour to go until Kevin Keatsman Uncanceled takes over, because I don't think this is the win that some people are making it out to be. 9:05 on a Wednesday. It's great to have you here on KCMO 95.7 FM. You may have heard the news yesterday that the White House is going to take over decision-making on the press pool from the White House Correspondents Association, which has governed the press pool for decades. I'm not a fan of this. And sometimes I think about it through the lens of, if Joe Biden had done this, and I know that, Joe wasn't really doing anything, but you get the point. If the Biden administration had done this. Come on, man. I mean, sorry, Joe. You weren't calling your own shots, buddy. We all know that. What would I say? And if Joe Biden said, you know what, forget the whole White House Correspondents Association. We're going to decide who's in the press pool. And that's going to be that. I'd be like, man, that ain't good. Now, we all know the White House Correspondents Association is going to be a liberal operation. That's undeniable. I mean, what's the percentage? 70, 80, 85%, maybe 90% of the media is going to lean left. So we know it's going to be a liberal operation, John.
The great philosopher Chris Plant likes to say the liberal media, but I repeat
I
myself.
repeat myself. Shout out to our old boy, Chris Plant. Well done there. We know it's going to lean left. We know it might heavily skew left, whatever your interpretation of that is. But this sets the precedent that undoubtedly is going to be copied going forward, where there could be a day when a future president says, you know what? We're not going to have Fox News in the press pool anymore. We're not going to have them here. And in the end, what really matters is who you pick on, right? Who gets selected to ask questions? To the credit of the Biden administration, or Karine Jean-Pierre, or whoever was White House Secretary, Jen Psaki, they would pick on our good pal Peter Doocy once in a while. He would get some zingers in there, and they were always well appreciated. They never picked on a guy named James Rosen from Newsmax. Now, regardless of what you think of Newsmax, James Rosen is a serious reporter and a really good journalist. But because he was a Newsmax guy, they were like, he's not a serious news organization. Is he any less serious than ABC or NBC or CBS or any of the other huckster outlets on the other side that got to ask questions all day because they were serious journalists? James Rosen, as an individual, is a serious journalist. He never got picked on because he was a Newsmax guy. But he was there, to his credit. He was there. What really matters is who gets to ask questions. And that's why this whole thing is really overblown. It doesn't matter who's in the room, because nowadays I can watch a White House press briefing on Facebook, right? I can watch the live stream on X. What matters is who gets to ask the questions, which has to be determined by who's in the room. But you can put, if you're a liberal president, you can put a bunch of conservatives in the room and never pick on them. Or if you're a conservative president, you can put a bunch of liberals in the room and never pick on them. Here's the difference. It's a game of numbers. There's always going to be more liberal people in the press. Therefore, there's a more likely odds that you have to pick on a liberal to ask a question once in a while. And no one has taken more questions than Donald Trump. So spare me the dictator thing on this as much as anything.
I think it was Obama who first replied in the press conference room. This is my house.
Oh, yeah.
So I can't remember who crossed him, but he brought that up first. And to your point, the guy in the thrifty nickel's always in the third row. They don't get called on, right? So it is who gets called on. I think they should do ping pong balls, lottery balls, and see who gets to ask a question. We got 10 questions, 10 balls, take a number.
Like they do the NBA draft.
So, yeah, there you go.
Remember that?
Lottery.
The lottery they do. The NBA does the ping pong ball thing.
We'll give the thrifty nickel 5 picks since it's not likely they're good. But anyway, to your point, yeah, it's just the same people get called on all the time.
Yeah, it does seem that way.
Organizations. Anyway.
Same organizations all the time. But I don't like the precedent here of the president picking who is going to be in the White House press briefing room. Because one day that's going to be turned on us. And as conservatives, what did we say back when Harry Reid remember this back in the day. Harry Reid, who was then the Senate Majority Leader from Nevada, he came out and he said, you know what? I'm going to reduce the votes on judges from 60 to 51, a simple majority. What happened? Mitch McConnell said, be careful what you wish for. The precedent was set. McConnell then took that and applied that to Supreme Court nominees. And that is how we got all of Trump's nominees on a simple majority, not getting to the 60-vote threshold. Harry Reid set the tone for that. Harry Reid laid the foundation for that. And then the Republicans said, you know what? You guys want to play this game? We're going to play it on our end. That's what we're going to do. And that's what I'd say about this situation. Not that I trust the White House Correspondents Association. I don't. They probably lean left. But if you want to be in a situation where suddenly the president and his team are picking who gets to be in the press briefing room, you might rue the day. And I'm just going to say, we don't want to have the conversation in 4 years, in 8 years, whenever, and there will be a Democrat in the White House again. That's how this works in this country. They will exist in the White House once again, where we're like, can you believe they're not letting Fox News in the press briefing room? I don't want to have that conversation one day. I don't. And if we have to have it, well, you know, if you're not outraged right now, you can't really be outraged in 4, 8, 12 years from now. You can't do it. The text line is 913-4087-957. That's also the studio line here on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. Pete, I think that should be the decision of whoever is president. If Joe Biden didn't want Fox News in there, they shouldn't be in there. Trump gives so many news conferences on the outside of the White House, it should not make much of a difference who is in there. They will still get to ask questions. Now, that's the caveat here. Trump obviously, I saw this yesterday. Trump has taken like 1,040 questions in his first month. Joe Biden took like 100. That was noted actually on CNN last night. So I see what you're saying there. But do you really want Joe Biden determining who's in the White House press briefing room? I don't.
This is how far we've come. The press is supposed to be completely independent.
Mm-hmm.
So the president shouldn't have any say.
No.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. Functioning independently, but it doesn't. And so now here we are.
Yeah.
Right?
And the thing that was noted by Jackie Henrick, Fox News senior White House correspondent, she was critical of this. And she said that this move does not give the power back to the people. It gives the power to the White House. Now, you can say the White House is duly elected, but the White House Correspondents Association is democratically elected by the full-time White House press corps. So basically, they get to vote on who the people are in charge and who the people are in power. 913-408-7957 on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. Streaming, as always, on the KCMO Talk Radio app. We've got our caller of the day coming up at the bottom of the hour. We've got this Clay County cop who was fired we'll tell you about. And two situations happened yesterday on the Johnson County side of the state line that puts home and proves home a point we've talked about for a very long time. And that is that crime in Kansas City will spread beyond Kansas City. We'll get to it next.
Hump Day on the Guy Benson Show. Great lineup for you. The border czar from the Trump administration. Tom Homan is here talking about his important work coming up at 2 o'clock on KCMO.
Two things happened last night in Johnson County about 12 minutes away from each other. And for those of you who think that, hey, not in my backyard, not in my neighborhood, I got some bad news for you. It is in your backyard, and it is in your neighborhood. So yesterday, I was first alerted to this, and I have not seen any stories on this in local news yet, but something happened at the 7400 block of Shawnee Mission Parkway. So it's Shawnee Mission and Metcalf. There's a quick trip there. And according to one of our listeners who actually was there and flagged this for us and posted a picture that's up on my X page at Pete Mundo, they claim that there was some attempt at grand theft auto at the quick trip on Shawnee Mission Parkway in Metcalf. And about an hour later, the Overland Park Police Department put an update on X, and they wrote here, officers responded to an armed robbery at a business in the 7400 block of Shawnee Mission Parkway. Now, this is that same location that one of our listeners posted about and took a picture of and tagged us on social media. They write here, a suspect was located and officers engaged in a vehicle pursuit that traveled into Missouri. The suspect was taken into custody in Lee's Summit. Overland Park PD has no update on this on its social media from 11 hours ago. It's like they want to bury this thing, sweep it under the rug. Not in Overland Park, not in our backyard. This stuff doesn't happen here. Oh, it does. But they just hope it doesn't get the coverage. That's what they hope. And then, same thing, last night, 12 minutes down the road, 8:30, gunshots erupt in a Prairie Village parking lot. Driver escapes from a would-be carjacker. Now, I don't know if these two situations are connected or not. We don't have any reporting on this. But this story, this separate incident in Prairie Village, was covered by KCTV5. They write here, Prairie Village police responded to an attempted armed carjacking, 1900 block of West 75th Street, just a few blocks north of Hy-Vee and due west of State Line Road. A driver was stopped at the red light when two suspects pulled up next to them in a motorcycle. The suspect passenger opened the victim's driver's side door. The victim was able to pull the door shut and drive west on 75th Street. One suspect pulled out a handgun and fired several shots at the victim as they drove away. The suspects fled eastbound on West 75th Street in Missouri and were apprehended by KCMO police after an accident. Both suspects were taken to the hospital, will be held in custody. Following treatment, they'll be charged. So you're at a red light in Perfect Village, as those residents like to call themselves. 8:30 at night. Not like it's 2:30 in the morning in Prairie Village. Not that that would be any more acceptable, but 8:30 at night. You could be in the car with your kids at 8:30 at night. And you've got this happening in Prairie Village, 75th Street and State Line Road. 12 minutes away from where there was either an armed robbery attempt or an armed carjacking situation, grand theft auto, at a quick trip on Shawnee Mission Parkway. For 5 years, we've talked about how if you don't get the crime under control in Jackson County, in KCMO proper, it will spread all over the region. It will spread east through Jackson County, where there have been plenty of problems. It will go to the Northland. It will come across the Kansas state line. It will happen. But for people who are all about defunding the police, they were all about ragging on cops in this town. They were all about, giving slaps in the wrist to criminals. Well, you reap what you sow. And trust me, there are many people in Prairie Village, sadly, who felt that way over the last few years. And now you can't be at a stoplight at 75th and State Line in Prairie Village and, frankly, feel like you're safe. And it's horrible. It's an absolutely horrible situation. And the Overland Park Police Department, at least when it comes to the one situation at Shawnee Mission Parkway and Metcalf, they have not done anything on this front yet. They don't. They have not said anything beyond a tweet from 11 hours ago. Now, if we don't have anything by lunch, I'll reach out to the police department and see what the heck happened there last night, who these people are who were arrested out in Lee Summit after the fact. But, man, this stuff is only going to get worse because the criminals are more emboldened than they've ever been. And yesterday, Guy Benson was talking about this on his show, not this story, but the crime issue. And one thing he alluded to, and I hadn't thought about this, I thought it was a really smart point, was that criminal operations and organizations are seemingly using underage criminals to commit some of the most heinous crimes. Because in our laws, what happens with kids? Well, they largely will get slapped on the wrist when they're minors, right? They're not going to get the full weight of the law that you would get as an adult because we have this belief, and it's largely understandable, kids' brains are not fully developed. If they're committing crimes, I mean, unless it's some heinous act, we're not going to charge them as an adult. We're going to get them into a juvie center and try to get their lives straightened out, and we're going to do it that way, John.
Family services. It's like what we saw down at Union Station, right? We've got some minors all caught up in this, and they're the kind. Their role sometimes in a gang is to take the weapon, and since if they get caught with it, they'll just go down to family service.
Yes, and it's admirable that we do that as a society, but something else stemming from COVID, kids were not in school, kids were hitting the streets earlier than ever, and these kids might now be 16, 17 years old, and they're part of, serious criminal activity, and they're potentially committing crimes that normally, if you were an adult doing this stuff, we could throw you in the can for a while. But with kids, you're not going to do it. The law doesn't allow for it in most cases. But they're doing these acts on behalf of whatever gang they're a part of. And that's leading to some very dangerous situations. And Benson was talking about it yesterday through the prism of the city of Chicago. But on a much more minor level, you can make the case that is happening right here in Kansas City. And it's impacting other parts of the community where typically you wouldn't have this stuff happening in Prairie Village. I know you're just over the state line, but still, you wouldn't think about it happening on the Prairie Village side of the state line. But it is. It is. 913-408-7957 is our text line and our studio line on KCMO. Pete, it's not new. Gangs have always done this. No, I know, but the point is it's gotten worse in recent years as they try to find ways around the law. And also these kids are joining gangs at earlier and earlier ages, and I think COVID had a major impact on that. You got single moms trying to work two jobs in some cases. The kids aren't in school. They're remote learning, air quotes, doing their thing on a laptop. No one's accountable for them. And we've seen this problem in Kansas City. The criminals are getting younger. I don't think that's just by chance. I don't. I think it all stems from where this country was just a few short years ago. And now you've got these two situations in Johnson County 10 minutes apart. And it's not like we're talking 2 a.m. We're talking 8, 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. Kevin Keatsman Uncanceled coming up in a half hour on KCMO. Our caller of the day was on a proposal on one side of the state line to ban cell phones in the classroom. We'll get to you on that and more next.
You're listening to Mundo in the Morning on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM.
Man, I saw this yesterday from Missouri Governor Mike Kehoe. I just loved every second of it. Banning cell phones in Missouri classrooms. I mean,
people are aroused. I haven't seen people so aroused in a very, very long time.
Not that much, but I was fired up by this. Governor Kehoe, writing here on X, to support stronger academic performance and protect the mental health of students statewide, Missouri needs distraction-free classrooms. He says, I'm urging the General Assembly to pass Senate Bill 68 to ban electronic communication devices from the beginning to the end of the school day. I just, oh my gosh, sign me up. Woo! You know, I really do. My kids are little. They're 6, soon to be 4, and soon to be 1, coming up on Monday. Can't believe it. And they will grow up, I think, in a different world when it comes to how we view the smartphone in particular. It seems like for the last 10 to 15 years, and I really do feel bad, that many parents, and this might be you, gave that kid of yours a phone earlier than in hindsight you would have because it was new. We didn't really understand how addictive it could be. We didn't understand what they could do with it. I mean, we did, but kind of was like, whatever. It's okay. They need a phone, right? And I think that now, if you're like my age and you've got kids my kid's age, you're going to look at that cell phone a lot different than maybe a parent did even 5 or 10 years ago. Like, I keep hearing about flip phones coming back because it gives you a phone. Your kid can make a phone call. They can text on it. They'll learn T9 like we did back in the heyday, the Nokias and the Motorola's and the whole thing, John. Yeah. You remember those days.
Sure. Hang on a minute. I got to answer my camera. Right? That's what we got nowadays.
That is what we have these days. So it's very different. But you can give a kid a phone without giving him a smartphone in case they've got to contact you, reach out, whatever it might be. So that's coming back, and I love that. But I know that's not going to happen overnight. In the meantime, we have a crisis on our schools. The testing is worse than ever, and I'm not blaming it all on the cell phones. I mean, Mark's daughter's got a phone. She's what, 12, Mark, your oldest?
Yeah.
Okay, she's got a phone. I think she's going to get a full ride to an Ivy League school one day.
Yeah, so far straight A's in middle school.
Based on her grades. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say every kid that isn't doing well can be blamed on the cell phone. It's not true. It's like anything else in life. You got some kids who are more mature than others, some kids who know how to use it, some kids who don't. The vast majority, I don't believe, do. Their brains aren't developed to the point where they can. So this, for the kids who already are going to have a tough time focusing, for kids who already just don't care about school, and it doesn't mean they won't succeed in life. I mean, how many kids do we all know who are C students who, are some of the maybe richest kids you went to school with because they founded something, they got into some business or some opportunity that was just perfectly suited to their talents. That happens all the time. But you still want to create a classroom environment where they're learning the basics and take away as many distractions as you can. So is this the most pressing thing in the state of Missouri? No. But if it can get through the legislature easily and Governor Kehoe will sign it, it makes life a lot easier for the teachers and for the schools where suddenly they don't have to listen to parents complain. They can say, listen, this is state law. All right, you don't like it? Move somewhere else. Go somewhere. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, it's state law. You can't have the phone in the classroom anymore. So it actually helps the schools. It helps the teachers. Just say, this is a blanket policy. This is how it's going to be. And this conversation this morning led to our caller of the day.
It's the Mundo in the Morning Caller of the Day on KCMO Talk Radio, now on FM at 95.7.
Mike is a teacher out of Olathe. Mike, what do you make of this proposal and support from Governor Kehoe on the Missouri side?
No, he's right. I'm about to go in the classroom. Dude, I've told my kids this, and we practiced. The last thing I want is you to have a cell phone. When they're nervous and stressed and then all of a sudden making noise or possibly distracting or bringing attention to where we're at, we're trying to lay low and stay quiet and be hidden. The last thing they need to be having is something that might bring attention to where we are. We're trying to keep them safe and get them the heck out of there as soon as possible, or hunker down. The last thing we want is them to have a device that they're going to be nervous about and using that might bring attention to where we're at. That's the wrong approach. Having them away is the right approach.
How big of an issue, I don't know how long you've been teaching, but how big of an issue have these phones become in the classroom?
Well, this is the first year at the school I'm at. I had them shut down last year, and a few of us did. Now everybody's got them in a sleeve at the front of the room, and it's beautiful. Kids are communicating. And when they're not, when we're done with the work, they communicate, or they work, or they just have quiet time, and it's a blessing because it's benefiting them. They've really adapted well here where I'm at.
What grade do you teach?
I teach sophomores, a couple of seniors and juniors in one class, but it's sophomore English.
Okay. Wow. Well, so now, and is that just your classroom policy, or is that the school policy to have the phones in the sleeve at the front of the classroom when they walk in?
School policy. It's mandated this year, and it hasn't been a problem. You know what? Fewer fights because there's fewer teeing up the fight that's going to happen in the commons. It's all these things. We've had almost 0 fights this year, and I think a lot of the bullying crap and the setting it up and all this other garbage that leads to conflict in between classes, it's been eliminated just by having the cell phones away, because you can't bully, you can't tee it up, you can't meet your girlfriend in the bathroom, all that kind of stuff.
I hadn't thought about some of those things. Now, I had a cell phone in high school, but it wasn't to the point where you could blow something up on Snapchat or TikTok or Instagram and the whole school can know about it in 5 minutes, right? I mean, that's now the world we live in. Even when I was a high schooler, you might miss a fight or two because you found out about it too late in the comments. Now it's like, hey, if everyone has their phone and they're on Snapchat or TikTok or Instagram, the whole world's going to find out about it in 5 minutes or less, John.
Must be the John Anthony algorithm. I get that all the time. Like, hey, there's a fight 18 hours ago. Hey, this looks good at the restaurant yesterday.
Yeah, that was a great deal at my favorite joint 3 days ago.
Yeah.
That is funny how that works on the algorithm sometimes, but you're right. And something Mike said there, too, that really stood out to me was how when they're nervous or they're stressed out, they'll just go to the phone. And frankly, I think that's a crutch for all of us sometimes. It's something I genuinely, hate's a strong word, but I'm trying to work on myself with, is when I get home, I try my best, and it's hard in this industry when you're kind of on call 24/7. I'm not saying feel bad for me. I'm just saying it's part of the job. And you feel like you always got to keep up with the news cycle. I'm like, all right, if I haven't looked at my phone in 30 minutes, what have I missed? What didn't I see? If I'm not constantly refreshing my news feed, is there something that happened that I might have missed that could be a great topic for the morning that I'll never know about? I mean, it's rare, but you convince yourself that you might be missing something at all times because the news cycle just never ends. And it's one of the problems that we have right now. But when you get upset with the kids, you get frustrated with the kids, you got to reprimand them. It's stressful. You're in the house and you're like, okay, what do I do? You step away for a second and you go to your phone. And I do it. And I hate that I do it. I know I'm going to do it. I hate that I'm going to do it, but I do it. And I'm trying to work on it. But just like the kids, you're just looking for a quick dopamine hit, a quick dopamine fix. And it's not even like I'm looking for anything. I don't even respond. I mean, I'll get texts. I see them. I don't respond to them. It's not the point. The point is you're just looking for something to kind of numb the pain of the moment. And even as an adult, I know it. I don't like it. But never mind kids, when your brains are not fully developed, it's an even worse situation to find yourself in. And that's why I so hope that Missouri and Kansas go down this road, ban these phones in these classrooms, get it done quickly. It's not the most important thing in the world, but then move on. 913-408-7957. We'll wrap up the show with you on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. And then we'll get to Kevin Keatsman coming up here at 10 o'clock with Kevin Keatsman Uncanceled. We'll get you something on a lighter note to wrap up the day next.
Dave Ramsey here, and you're listening to Pete Mundo on KCMO Talk Radio, now airing on FM at 95.7.
Just got a video from Kate of our middle child, Chloe, walking into the local elementary school. She's 3.5. She'll be 4 in a couple of months, going in for speech therapy. And, man, it is so weird. It's like, how is she that old already? She's walking into the school with one of the teachers, and it's like, what is going on here? That is just happening way too fast. It's weird. But I know many of you who have much older children than me probably look at it and say, oh, that's nothing. Just wait. Just wait. 20 years will go by in a blink of an eye. Oh, my gosh.
It does, and then it doesn't.
Man, I'll tell you what. The cliche, days are slow and years are fast. Oh, my gosh.
Yes,
that
sir.
is so true. So true.
13 to 18 might be rough for us.
Yeah, well, I'll be doing an afternoon show by then as well. You know, when they get to that age, I'll do mornings and then I'll come back and do an afternoon show. I just figure that's only right, only fair. That's my plan, at least. Not sure how my voice will hold up, but you can come back, Mark. You can produce that show as well.
All right.
You might need to, man. Just get out of the house a little bit. All right. You know, there are people out there who like think they're really good at something and they're awful at it. One of the most important things in life you can be is self-aware. Know your strengths, know your weaknesses, know what you're not good at. Like, I don't view myself as being like great or even really good at a lot of things, but I know what I'm not good at. And that can actually get you pretty far. Just knowing what you're not good at, John, is a very valuable trait to have.
It is a strength to know your weakness.
Yes, exactly. And try to work on those weaknesses. But then there are people who think they're good at stuff, and you're just like, why are you doing this to yourself, right? Why are you bothering? Well, that's Maxine Waters, California Congresswoman. She loves the microphone. She loves being the center of attention. And every time she does it, she honestly just sounds like an imbecile. Here she was yesterday on the House floor railing against this House GOP budget plan. It passed by 2 votes, 217 to 215. All the Democrats voted against it. All the Republicans voted for it, except for Thomas Massie out of Kentucky. And Maxine Waters decided, you know what? The people need to hear from me.
We're no. Democrats are no on this budget. It is outrageous that you all have the audacity to come here with this budget that harms so many Americans and ask us to support billionaires and think we're going to buy it? You think we're going to support it? Well, you got another thought coming. We ain't doing it.
Oh.
Nobody cares.
We ain't doing it, says Maxine Waters. Like, was that supposed to be a great rant? Was that supposed to be a mic drop moment? Oh, I showed them. An 86-year-old going on 106, rambling on the House floor about how the GOP House bill stinks. What constituency base saw that and was like, yeah, you get them, Maxine? The octogenarians who are in the nursing home might have seen that somewhere in California and been like, got them. There wasn't a normal person who was like, oh, man, that was great, Maxine. Those are some salient points. But she insists on being part of the conversation. She wants to be the center of attention. And at some point, someone's got to pull her aside and be like, Maxine, this ain't working like you think it is. I promise you it's not. I know you perceive yourself to look. It's like those before and after pictures people do for themselves. And they're like, oh, man, I've lost so much weight. I look great. But then we look at the photos and we're like, I'm kind of seeing the same thing here. Not seeing a big difference in these pictures.
I think you just changed the part in your hair.
Yeah. Or you know what they do? You hike up the pants a little higher to make yourself look slimmer, and you smile and you open your leg. Like, I don't mean literally open your legs, but your stance is a little wider to make your legs look slimmer. It's just, that's what people do on these before and after photos. And it really doesn't work. At least it doesn't work like they think it works. But some people cannot help themselves. I'll give Sharice Davids this here in Kansas. At least she knows her strengths and, more importantly, her weaknesses. She does not go around searching for the microphone, which is beneficial to her. If she did, I don't actually think she'd get reelected by the margins that she gets reelected by. But she puts some tweets, she sends out some emails, and that's kind of it. There's not a lot of media. because she's not good at it. But she knows that, or at least she's listened to somebody who's told her that, which has been beneficial to her. Now, someone else who just loves the microphone, we talked a little bit about her yesterday because she's been going viral a lot lately. Jasmine Crockett, a squad wannabe from Dallas, Texas. She's doing all the media, The View. She's also done Charlemagne the God, popular urban radio show that's syndicated. Well, yesterday, outside of the Capitol building, she was asked this.
If you could speak directly to Elon Musk, what would you say?
F off.
That's it.
Oh, F off. That's what you would say to Elon Musk. That's what you think the voters are dying to hear. You know, one thing Donald Trump brought to politics was kind of this brash, aggressive tone. But what people don't realize, and what even Republican politicians who want to be Donald Trump don't get and can't duplicate, is there is a little bit of charm in the approach of Donald Trump. It doesn't get as much attention when people try to explain Donald Trump's appeal. But even the tough-talking Republicans out there, they don't realize that Trump does have a charm that works. But instead, these politicians try to copy him. More so, you know, Republicans want to be him. They want to have that brash approach. But they don't have that twinkle in the eye when they do it. They don't have a little bit of that charm that Trump has that softens the whole approach. And he had that yesterday with this hilarious moment in the Oval Office.
Give me all of them.
And what Trump's got here is a bunch of hats that say Trump was right about everything, and he's trying to hand them out to the press.
See that? Trump was right about everything. It just came in. Somebody said, I said, this was sent in by a fan. I said, I think we should make some of them, right? But we were pretty much. You want one? Are you allowed to take one? Because he'll consider it. I know him well. He's sort of a stiff. Brian, you're not a stiff. You're sort of a stiff guy. He'll take other things, but not a free hat.
Always say yes to the president. Always say yes to the
Would
president.
anybody like one?
Anyone want a hat? Trump was right about everything? Any of you? I mean, he must take so much joy in a moment like that. After all this guy has been through the last few years, he can still laugh about it with the people that tried to bury him. Like, that's a skill right there. That's a skill. And it's an underappreciated skill that I've not seen anybody else in our political environment, left or right, duplicate in the last few years. Kevin Keatsman is next.
He's sort of a stiff.
He is not a stiff. And he will have you till 11 on KCMO.